Chapter 22. For Kanzaki Colored Glaze. Today was supposed to be a rather leisurely day. She was studying at Tokyo's first high school, which was located in the port area of Tokyo. It was a school that ran 6 days a week. Thus, after waking up early in the morning, Colored Glaze first went to check on Ryuto's situation. She only returned to her study to read when she found that he wasn't awake. Colored Glaze read about 100 books every year. Most of them were ancient and foreign books that were difficult to understand. If it weren't for the fact that she could read 10 lines at a glance, had a strong memory, and had a strong comprehension ability, it would be impossible for her to memorize so much information. Bang! However, just as Colored Glaze was reading in her study, she heard the faint sound of a gunshot coming from the guest room. This is a gunshot. And it's coming from Ryuto's guest room? Colored Glaze's 5 senses were also very sharp. She immediately stood up and walked outside. "Milady, it might be dangerous over there. You should wait here." But before she reached the door, 16 knights dancing costume blocked Colored Glaze's path. Although she didn't know what happened, since there was a gunshot, it meant that something must have happened in the guest room. The only people on the other side were the butler, the cat house, and Tong Sheng Ryudo, who was lying on the bed. No matter what happened, it wasn't an environment suitable for Milady to go over. "Get out of my way." Colored Glaze didn't buy it at all. She said righteously, "This is my home. No matter what happens, I have the right, and need to be the first to know." This, before Dancing Costume could react, Colored Glaze had already pushed her aside and walked past her. "Milady!" Sigh. Helpless, Dancing Costume could only follow behind her and walk towards the guest room. When they arrived outside the guest room, Colored Glaze discovered that there were many servants and guards gathered there. However, no one dared to enter. After all, everyone knew that the person inside was the boss of the cat house. If anything happened, it was not their place to intervene. They could only wait outside. However, Colored Glaze did not have such concerns. She walked towards the door and asked loudly, "Bunny Ball? What's going on? Why are there gunshots inside?" Hearing this, Rabbit Ball's face turned green. Opportunity. On the other side, Ryuto also pretended to insert the long needle in his hand into his neck, intending to blackmail Rabbit Ball. Seeing that eldest Miss was about to push open the door and barge in, Rabbit Ball finally couldn't bear the torment and chose to surrender. "All right, I promise you." Although it was only 5 words, they were the most painful words Bunny Ball had ever said in his life. A man's promise is worth 1,000 gold, and a guardian ninja is even more so. Helplessly, Rabbit Ball could only agree to Ryuto's request and do something for him. With this old butler's strength, the range of things he could do was really wide, almost the same as origami. From this point of view, this blackmail incident was simply a gift to Ryuto. Very good. Seeing that Rabbit Ball finally admitted defeat, Ryuto also put away the long needle in his hand. Voila! Just as Ryuto put away the needle, Colored Glaze also rushed in with the dancing costume. "You two, what's going on?" Originally, when she heard the gunshots, Colored Glaze thought that Rabbit Ball and Ryuto probably had a conflict, even to the point of using weapons. Who knew that the moment she entered the door, Colored Glaze would be shocked by the strange scene in front of her, because these 2 men, who were fighting to the death, were now standing side by side in front of the painting of the goddess, having a friendly yet strange conversation. "Young Master Ryuto, what do you think of this painting?" Rabbit Ball reached out his white-gloved hand to the painting on the wall. The goddess of witches on the painting was shining on this old butler. "Very good." Ryuto put his hands behind his back and posed like a connoisseur. "How is it good?" This painting of the goddess doesn't focus on the lines in a conventional manner. Instead, it focuses on the changes in light and shadow. It shows the unique beauty of the Impression school of painters. It's a good painting that's at least 100 years old. Your comments are quite accurate. Although this painting was drawn by a painter from the Great River Painting School, and in fact, it was drawn yesterday, the ink on it hasn't dried yet. "Is that so? Ha ha ha." Butler Rabbit Ball is also someone who knows the art. Not bad, not bad. Suddenly, Long Do revealed a happy smile. He didn't feel any shame at being exposed for spouting nonsense just now. What are these 2 doing? Are they crazy? Colored Glaze originally thought that she would see a fierce battle between the two, but in the end, they were just flattering each other. Moreover, this bragging was a little too despicable. How shameless. At this moment, the two of them also turned around and looked at Miss Leolie. Miss, your old butler is really interesting. I admire him. Is that so? Then what was the gunshot just now? Colored Glaze's eyebrows twitched slightly, looking at the paper bag on the ground. In the paper bag, there was a pistol that was put back by Rabbit Ball. There was still a faint smell of gunpowder coming from the muzzle. This one has some experience in using a spear, so I was just teaching young Master Longdo how to use a spear, but I accidentally misfired. This one has neglected his duty and disturbed young Mississippi. Rabbit Ball was also someone who could lie without blinking. He hurriedly bowed to Luli and put on a look of fear and trepidation. But this was nonsense. Colored Glaze knew that the truth was definitely not like what Rabbit Ball said. After all, no one would teach someone how to use a gun in the guest room. The two of them must have had an argument, then used some method to reconcile. No, just reconcile in front of me? Although she didn't know what the two of them were doing, Colored Glaze couldn't pursue it for now. After all, looking at their expressions, they definitely wouldn't tell Colored Glaze the truth. Therefore, she immediately waved to Ryudo and said with a smile, "Ryudo classmate, you must be hungry. Let's go eat first." It was already noon, Colored Glaze didn't have lunch, and Ryudo was already starving. Therefore, he replied without hesitation, "Okay, then let's find a quiet place to slowly eat and chat." Speaking up to here, Longdo even clearly glanced at Rabbit Ball. Between his brows, there was an expression of a vile person intoxicated by success. "Damn old man, I'm going to eat with your miss now. Do you have any objections? If you do, then hold it in. Don't forget that you still owe me something, hee hee hee." When he saw Longdo's arrogant look, it was the first time Bunny Ball felt his defenses being broken. I sigh. When Colored Glaze left the guest room with Ryudo and walked to the corner of the Kamishiro courtyard, Rabbit Ball could only shake his head and walk out like a defeated rooster. Chapter 23. Sorry, it was actually Bunny Ball who caused trouble for you. When Ryudo followed the lady out of the guest room and came to the hallway under the shocked gazes of the servants, Colored Glaze said to him with a bitter smile. When they left, Colored Glaze purposely dismissed the servants, even the dancing costume, in order to have a good chat with Ryudo. Although she didn't know what happened inside, Colored Glaze wasn't stupid. She could roughly guess that it was Bunny Ball who made the first move. After all, Kamiyoshi had restricted Colored Glaze's social interactions for so many years, so she naturally knew best. From the time she was conscious, Colored Glaze didn't have a single male friend. It wasn't that she didn't have a boyfriend, but that she didn't have any male friends. In school, basically all males who tried to get close to her would receive serious warnings, or even threats. Of course, Ryudo Kiryu himself was warned by Kamiyoshi more than once. But he was a young master after all. Being warned and threatened was nothing out of the ordinary. Naturally, he wouldn't be scared. But from the gunshots just now, Kamiyoshi didn't seem to be satisfied with just warnings and threats to deal with Ryudo. He chose to be serious. However, Ryudo replied with a smile. "Actually, the old butler only gave me a slight warning to not have any close contact with you. There's nothing else to be unlucky about." As the person who actually took advantage of the situation, Ryudo didn't plan to backstab Bunny Ball. After all, he still had to ask them for help in the future. So Colored Glaze asked curiously, "Is that so? Then how did you answer?" "My answer? Do you really want to hear it?" Speaking until here, Ryudo revealed a slightly teasing smile, although it looked more like a sinister smile. "Say it, we are partners now. There's nothing that can't be said. I like you, and I will definitely marry you in the future." Before Ryudo finished his sentence, Colored Glaze slipped and fell on the ground in the hallway. This. I asked you to say your answer, not to confess. And what do you mean by you will definitely marry me? The moment Colored Glaze fell forward, she felt her blood pressure rapidly rise, and a gush of blood rushed to the top of her head, causing her to fall on the ground. But before colored glaze fell to the ground, a strong arm already picked her up in the air. With Long Do's current physical strength, it wasn't a big problem for him to pick up the lady who had fallen next to him. Moreover, Lily was really light. Although the woman's body wasn't particularly petite, it was as if she had no bones and felt soft. This is probably the second time. But this time, it's not because of low blood sugar. After hugging her slender body into his embrace, Long Do gently smiled and whispered into her ear. When colored glaze was hugged, she felt her breath stop for a few seconds. A warm and masculine male scent, solid and reliable shoulders and chest. Last time, when she fell into Ryudo's arms in the warehouse, it was because of dizziness that she couldn't feel clearly. But this time was different. After all, colored glaze's mind was completely clear. After so many years, it was the first time she was so close to a man her age. As a result, when Luli steadied herself, her face had already turned red like a big, cute apple. Of course, this panic only lasted for a few short seconds. After taking a deep breath, colored glaze turned her head and angrily said, "I asked you to tell me what happened. Who told you to confess? Shameless." "I didn't confess. That was my answer to Bunnyball." "You and Bunnyball? You really said that to him?" "Of course, it's all from the bottom of my heart." Whether it was facing Bunnyball in the cat house or Kanzaki colored glaze herself, Ryudo didn't plan on hiding his desires. "That's right, I like colored glaze, missus. What's so shameful about it? A man would admit what he did. Besides, he had tried chopping off heads with a machete, piercing the chest with bullets, piercing the acupoints with long needles, and exploding heads. Ryudo didn't think he had anything to be afraid of. But this time, after hearing Ryudo's statement, colored glaze didn't blush. Instead, she couldn't help but sigh. What an unprecedented idiot. It's not like he didn't know the consequences of doing this. After a while, she helplessly said, "Come with me. There are some things I need to clarify with you." "Some things you need to clarify? No way, you need to find a place to reject me?" Looking at colored glaze's rapidly departing figure, Ryudo could only silently follow her. Although he had just expressed his feelings, he didn't expect colored glaze to give him any positive feedback. After all, although their relationship had improved, it wasn't to the point where his confession would be successful. As the two of them walked through a corridor, they arrived at a courtyard surrounded by a pillar-shaped fence. What appeared before Ryudo's eyes was a small shrine. There was a pure white torii built in front of the shrine, reminding visitors that they were in a sacred area and that they should maintain a humble attitude. A zigzag rope made of straw represented the sacred boundary and was tied to the surrounding trees. In the middle of the small shrine, there was a statue made of white jade. The statue was about the size of a real person, and it was dancing. When they arrived in front of the female statue, colored glaze raised her head and looked at the face that was about to vomit. She emotionlessly said, "This is the god that we have always worshipped in Kamiyoshi. Heavenly enchantment female fate." Heavenly enchantment female fate. I think it's the goddess of witches? It's said that she's the earliest witch? That's right. The direct female relatives of Kamiyoshi come here to pray for an hour every day, rain or shine, to ask the gods to grant them spiritual power. Tisk. Hearing this explanation, Ryudo disdainfully snorted. How stupid. Instead of spending so much time praying to dead things, it's better to spend time on yourself. Sorry. Ryudo himself was an atheist, so he naturally didn't have a good impression of this ancient and primitive ritual. But he quickly stopped talking. After all, colored glaze was the eldest daughter of Kamiyoshi. She grew up with these things, so it wasn't good to talk about this in front of her. However, when colored glaze heard Ryudo's words that were obviously filled with contempt, she nodded. Then she said with an obviously angry tone, "Indeed, praying to this kind of garbage is just a waste of time, a waste of life. It can even be considered slow murder." What? When Long Do heard Lioli scolding him even more fiercely than he did, he couldn't help but be frightened. Chapter 24. What's going on? Why would colored glaze? She seems to have a huge problem with this heavenly chef? No, strictly speaking, the heavenly chef is the first generation of Miko, and also the foundation of the Kamiyoshi. From this perspective, colored glaze seems to have a huge problem with the entire Kamiyoshi. The next generation of Zaiwang, who is going to inherit the ancestral land, is actually cursing at the god that he worships. If Ruri's words were heard by an outsider, it would definitely cause a huge commotion that would engulf the entire Kanzaki family. Maybe it's because there's no one else around, or maybe it's because colored glaze finally met a friend that she can speak freely. So she openly expressed her disgust towards the heavenly chef, and even towards the shrine, Zaiwang, Kamiyoshi, Miko, and other Shinto creations. In fact, this disgust has been deeply hidden in colored glaze's heart for many years. Every time she prays to the heavenly chef statue, she can't help but want to smash it. What's the reason? It starts with the origin of the heavenly chef, the goddess of Miko. The origin of the goddess of Miko can be traced back to the ancient myth, the legend of the heavenly Aikido, because the famous god Susanoo ran amok in Takamagara. Amaterasu hid in the heavenly Aikido after getting angry, and the world was instantly plunged into darkness. The gods gathered outside the heavenly Aikido, but no one was able to get Amaterasu out of there. Thus, someone asked the heavenly enchantress to hold a bamboo leaf and dance on an upside-down bucket. Because she danced too hard, her clothes loosened, and the heavenly enchantress twisted her body half-naked, making the gods burst into laughter. Through this dance, Amaterasu was lured out, and the world returned to light. Because of this, Amaterasu's twisting was considered the origin of the Japanese dance, and it developed into the kagura, used in rituals, and directly gave birth to the Miko profession. Sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the top, sometimes to the bottom, and sometimes to the bottom. This is what the heavenly enchantress looks like when she dances. Looking at the dancing statue in front of her, colored glaze clenched her fists as she described the charm of the goddess when she was dancing. Obviously, the thing that was sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes up, and sometimes down, was definitely not something that should be exposed in public. And the thing that was partly hidden and partly visible under the skirt should not be used to entertain other people's private parts. If one thought about the fact that the heavenly bestowed daughter had to expose these body parts in front of countless people and constantly twist and turn to make others laugh, this scene was really not very elegant. After hearing the origin of this statue, Longdo couldn't help but open his mouth wide. Wait a minute? Was this really a god? How could there be a striptease god? In the country where Ryudo lived before, it was impossible for people to worship such a ridiculous god, except for some special places. Because he was too shocked, he could only say in a low voice, "This Miko goddess is really, how do I put it? Quite despicable, right?" Although Ryudo didn't want to be so direct, colored glaze was too lazy to care, and she said these words in front of the Amaterasu statue. However, this plaything that stands on a wooden barrel and performs a striptease for others is the god that we, the Kamishiro family, respect the most. In fact, he's even considered to be our ancestor. Ever since she knew this, colored glaze always thought that the people in this world were crazy. How was this god worthy of respect? How was it worthy of worship? How was it worthy of learning? Also, the so-called 8 million gods outside the Rock of Heaven, watching the naked Amaterasu dance, didn't look like good people? A group of men couldn't pull out a cowardly Amaterasu hiding in a hole, but they let a woman dance with a ball in front of everyone. What great power! Whenever colored glaze thought that the Amaterasu she learned from a young age had such an origin, she couldn't help but want to vomit. The more she learned about the Shinto religion, the more she felt that the gods in it were all bad people. Even the Mikado family who relied on this religion to rule the people were a bunch of trash in colored glaze's eyes. As the eldest daughter of Kamiyoshi, and a relative of the Mikado family, colored glaze had seen who knew how many high officials and nobles she had seen since she was young. Therefore, colored glaze clearly knew that the rotten nobles only cared about exploiting the bottom rung of society, and didn't believe in the gods from the beginning. They only used the name of the gods to control the public opinion, so that they could stabilize their ruling rights, and profit from it to fill their own pockets. As for the so-called Wang, it was just a tool used to carry out a mythical rule, nothing more. The most infuriating thing was that in order to protect this fake mythical world, Colored Glaze had to pay with her own life. Ryudo, I'm the next Wang. So before and during my term, I can't live my own life. You know this, right? That does seem to be the case. When he heard Colored Glaze mention the Wang, Ryudo couldn't help but grit his teeth. Throughout history, the average term of a Wang was about 25 years. In other words, from the time Colored Glaze inherited the throne at the age of 18, she had to be at least 40 years old before she could leave her duties and return to her own life. In these 25 long years, she couldn't fall in love, couldn't get married, couldn't go abroad, couldn't travel, couldn't. There were too many things she couldn't do. Poor embroidered family's daughter, lying alone beside the lamp and ancient Buddha. With Colored Glaze's personality, she definitely wouldn't be willing to squat in a cold temple like this for 20 years. Especially when she saw the reason for all this, and understood that everything she did was meaningless, and that she was just putting up a peaceful front for a group of rotten people. At this time, Ryudo could feel the thick hatred from this young lady. She had hatred in her heart, hatred for the Kamiyoshi, hatred for the Mikado and the other ruling classes, hatred for the Shinto religion. After spilling out all the hatred in her heart, Luli seemed to heave a sigh of relief. The grievances that had been suppressed for so many years were also released quite a bit. But she still turned to Ryudo and said, "So, do you understand? Your pursuit of me is meaningless, because this isn't something I can decide on my own. Stop now before it's too late." After going around in circles and saying a lot of things, Colored Glaze still returned to Ryudo's feelings for her, hoping to dissuade him from his irrational behavior. After all, if Ryudo continued to pester her, the Kamiyoshi, and even the Mikado wouldn't sit still. At that time, it wouldn't be as simple as letting Bunny Ball poke him with a needle. After all, in the eyes of those in power, a human life was worth less than an ant. Chapter 25. Looking at Colored Glaze's resentful expression, Ryudo didn't know what to say. But he couldn't help but think of the ending of the first female protagonist in the original game. In Red Album 2, no one survived. Every female protagonist had two endings, the righteous ending and the evil ending. If it was the righteous ending, then the male and female protagonists gathered everyone's strength to defeat Tenmu Ayam. But they couldn't be together as they wished. But after defeating the conspiracy, Colored Glaze still had to go back to fulfill her family's duties and spend the first half of her life as the king. In other words, the protagonists could deal with the conspiracy of this world, but they couldn't deal with the world itself. On the day I leave this cage, if you still remember me, let's meet at the same place. In the last scene of the game, after leaving this sentence, the young lady slowly walked towards the crowd that came to greet her. At that moment, her back looked no different from a prisoner in prison, except this cage was plated with gold. After that, the game came to an abrupt end, leaving a half-open ending. After more than 20 years, would Colored Glaze and the protagonist meet again? Could they cross a quarter of a century and continue their relationship? Many people thought the answer was yes. No matter how long they were apart, they wouldn't forget each other. But Ryudo couldn't accept this ending. Why? This was too humiliating. More than 20 years. And it was the most golden 20 years of his life, gone just like that? Originally, they were in love, but they had to wait until they were in their 40s. After they were old, they could only be together with the person they liked. Was this a happy ending? In comparison, the other evil path ending was much more pleasant. In the end, the protagonist fell to Tenmu Ayam's side and became the king of the new world. He killed the Mikado and Kamiyoshi and took Colored Glaze into his harem. Although this ending was rather evil and led to the deaths of many humans, it was surprisingly well received by the players. The reason was very simple. Many players were probably resentful of this rotten world and hoped that the protagonist would be able to take revenge. However, the world that Ryudo was currently in was not a game, but another reality based on the game world. In this real world, Everyone was a living being. They were not just paper figures made of data and pictures. Therefore, when he saw colored glaze's complicated and helpless expression, Ryudo felt even more shocked and angry than when he saw the game's ending. From an objective point of view, since colored glaze had enjoyed the benefits of being born in Kamiyoshi, she had the responsibility to contribute something. This was understandable. But sometimes human emotions were hard to judge from an objective point of view, especially when something happened around you, or happened to someone you liked. Very well, I've decided. So after pondering for a few seconds, Ryudo raised his head, walked to the statue of Heavenly Enchantress, and said in a firm tone, "You finally decided to return to a normal life, and no longer have anything to do with me?" Hearing this, colored glaze finally breathed a sigh of relief, because she knew that this was actually the best choice for both of them. But Longdo shook his head and smiled. "I've decided to get you. No matter what trouble I encounter, I won't hesitate." "What? Does this guy not understand human language?" Suddenly, colored glaze's face showed a dumbfounded expression. At first, she thought that Ryudo was just a big idiot. Later, she found that this person seemed to be quite smart. Now she found out that he was still a big idiot, the kind that was incurable. "Do you know how much trouble you will encounter here? How many people will stand in front of you? It doesn't matter. If there are, just throw them into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish. The Tokyo Bay is big enough to accommodate so many people. They can also fatten the fish and make some contributions to the fishing industry. Your way of thinking is simply lawless." "Lawless? That's right. By the way, miss, you seem to have forgotten who I am?" With that said, Ryudo easily picked up a sharp stone from the ground and walked toward the statue of Heavenly Enchantress. As he walked, he smiled and said, "I'm the next leader of the designated violent group, Rulon Group. I'm an extreme rogue. Who understands what you're talking about?" As everyone knew, there were two types of extreme gangs in Japan. The first was the violent group, and the second was the non-violent group. The violent group was the traditional extreme gang. They did everything. It could be said that they were a group of rotten people wandering on the edge of prison. The second type of non-violent group was usually a semi-legal organization that operated a company through unorthodox means or open nightclubs and other facilities to make money by skirting the edges. Ryudo's Rulon group belonged to the scope of the violent group. It was a designated violent group that was targeted by the police because of its numerous crimes. This designated meant that it was a thorn in the eyes of the authorities. It meant that it needed to be strictly controlled. It was equivalent to the rogue superstar Yanko Star in the violent group. That's right, Ryudo Kiryu was the man who had become a Yanko Star. In the future, no matter what Ryudo wanted to do or work, he would be strictly watched because his background was dark from the day he was born. Compared to ordinary people, from the beginning, it was difficult for this identity to have a normal life. So since it was like this, then he might as well play big. Under colored glaze's shocked gaze, Ryudo used the sharp stone in his hand to scratch the head of the Heavenly Eye Female Fate statue, leaving a long scar. This Heavenly Eye Female Fate statue was the most precious treasure of Kamiyoshi. It was carved out of the highest quality white jade and had been passed down for more than 1,000 years. Its value could not be measured by money, but Ryudo did not hesitate to draw a big X on the face of the goddess of witchcraft. This act of not showing any respect to the gods and Buddhas, and even writing on the face of a god to pee. If other people in Kamiyoshi saw this, they might catch Ryudo and drown him in a pig cage. But fortunately, there was no one around, other than the trembling 16 Knights dancing costume, who was hiding in the dark. What's going on? Is there something wrong with this person's brain? Dancing costume was only following Bunkamura's order to prevent Ryudo from doing anything inappropriate. But she unexpectedly saw such a shocking scene. That wasn't the end of it. What Longdo said next almost made her faint on the spot. "Young miss, let's make a bet." "Bet? What bet?" "If 2 years later you don't need to take over the position of Zaiwang, come to Rulon Group and be my wife, how about it?" In front of the most respected Heavenly Eye Female Fate statue in Kamiyoshi, Ryudo extended his hand to the young miss and confirmed his future path. Chapter 26. Kanzaki-colored glaze was currently 16 years old, and there were still 2 years until her coming-of-age ceremony. After she graduated from high school at 18 years old, and her coming-of-age ceremony was over, she would immediately become the house king and become a caged bird. At this moment, Longdo said these words in a very domineering manner, or rather, he made such a bet. I'll bet with you that you won't become the house king in 2 years. If I win the bet, then you'll marry me and become the wife of the group leader. Without a doubt, this was a very domineering bet. Ryudo didn't even say what would happen if he lost the bet. But even if he didn't say it, both sides knew what would happen if they lost the bet. From what Ryudo wanted to do, if he lost, he would definitely be gone. What was there to talk about? After all, what he was doing now was equivalent to becoming enemies with the 2 largest forces in the game. In the game, there were only 2 main forces. The Kamiyoshi, that was backed by the country's forces led by the emperor. The Tenmu group, that had been hiding in the dark for many years, and had infiltrated every corner of the game. And the protagonists could only join one side in the story, and become enemies with the other side in order to obtain the final victory. However, Ryudo didn't seem to want to join either side. If he wanted to save the colored glaze, he had to suppress the Kamiyoshi. But Ryudo didn't want to borrow the power of the Tenma group. After all, he couldn't forget that Ayam had planned to feed him to the fish yesterday. So, Ryudo planned to take the third path, a path that didn't exist in the game. He didn't want to rely on either side. He would even fall out with both sides in the future, and become a true third party. If he was alone, Ryudo wouldn't be able to do this no matter what. But fortunately, Ryudo still had the Rulon group, so he wasn't fighting alone. This extreme force was only a medium-sized organization in the world of the original work, and it couldn't influence the situation at all. However, as a glorious transmigrator, Ryudo naturally had the confidence to develop this organization into a behemoth that could challenge Kamiyoshi and Heavenly Eye Group. It was precisely because of this confidence that he dared to propose this 2-year agreement to Colored Glaze. From an objective point of view, Ryudo's confidence was not unfounded. Unfortunately, Colored Glaze didn't know this. So in her eyes, Ryudo was a big fool who sacrificed himself for love. Big idiot. A big idiot who doesn't listen to human words. Forget it. Since he doesn't want to listen to my advice, then I'll bet with him this time. If I don't need to be Jaiwang in 2 years, I'll go to your place and be the wife of the team leader. That should be fine, right? With a helpless smile, Colored Glaze also reached out and grabbed the hand that was reaching towards her. She also hoped that this bet would end with Ryudo's victory. After all, compared to being Jaiwang and spending more than 20 years in prison, it was better to be the wife of the Rulon group. Besides, although Ryudo Kiryu was a bit stupid and looked a bit fierce, he seemed to be a good person, so it wasn't impossible to make do with him. After holding Colored Glaze's hand, Ryudo felt the warmth and softness in his hand and laughed heartily. Very good. It's a deal. Then I'll go first. Goodbye. Hey, wait. Don't go yet. Just as Ryudo was about to sign the bet with Colored Glaze and was about to leave, Colored Glaze hurriedly stopped him. What? You don't want me to leave? Don't want me to leave. You made the statue look like this. Don't tell me you want me to deal with this mess? Suddenly, Colored Glaze reached out and pointed at the statue and put on an attitude of deal with the trouble you caused. Don't think about taking the opportunity to leave. Ugh. After looking at the jade statue with a big X drawn by himself, Ryudo was stunned for a while. In fact, he just did that just to follow the atmosphere and prove to Colored Glaze that he had the determination to fight against Kamiyoshi. He didn't expect that after acting cool, he would have to personally clean up the mess. Therefore, in the next few hours, Ryudo squatted next to the jade statue and used sandpaper to carefully polish the face of Jaiwang, trying to smooth out the big X. How should this scene be described? Although the action of scratching the face of the statue is very cute, the way you desperately polish it is really embarrassing. What a big idiot. Don't you think about the consequences when you do something? But this kind of person is quite interesting, hee. He looked at Long Do, who was sweating profusely as he polished the face of the statue. During the whole process, Colored Glaze was eating the cake sent by Dancing Costume, while sitting on the side, and appreciating it with a smile. After this happened, Ryudo's "the wind is blowing and the water is cold" momentum naturally disappeared. When he finally walked out of the Kamishiro courtyard, with sweat all over his body, this young Master Kyoto looked like a plumber who had just fixed a water pipe and was covered in sweat. Are you kidding me? Don't other people leave the scene after making a big promise with the female lead? Why am I in such a mess here? After sighing, Ryudo lamented the unfairness of the heavens while ordering his 2 men in black to drive the car back to the Rulon group. Now, in addition to the tightly tied up Yamamoto and the 3 hitmen leaving with Ryudo, there were also the 2 bodyguards who were caught yesterday. Yes, the 2 who liked to play tortoiseshell and watch wrestling movies. Although the 2 black-suited bodyguards were Yamamoto's men, they seemed to be loyal to Ryudo and could be useful to him. But their names were somewhat strange. The 2 men in black were 2 brothers, one called Kamita Tamono, and the other called Kamita Tamono. Kamita was their surname. Kamita and Tamono were their given names. Every time he heard their full names, Ryudo wondered if their parents had a screw loose, otherwise, why would they give them such weird names? But from their names, the 2 brothers were indeed very suitable for tortoise binding and wrestling. Tamono, drive back to the Rulon Group headquarters. Young master, I am Tamono. Kamita is on the side. So sorry, let's go, Tamono. You look 70 to 80% alike, and you both wear black suits, sunglasses, and have a crew cut. Who would be able to tell the difference? When the car finally started slowly, Ryudo, who was sitting in the back seat, looked at the unfamiliar scenery outside the window and took a deep breath. Although he successfully came out of the Kamishiro courtyard, his battle was not over, or rather, it was just the beginning. And the next step was to go to the Rulon Group headquarters. A real bloody storm was about to start. Chapter 27. For the people who lived in Tokyo, Kamichiro was a place that most adults knew. This was a city that never sleeps after nightfall. It was the gathering place for all the urban men and women who pursued entertainment. In this small street, there were more than 4,000 nightclubs, bars, small theaters, game halls, and other entertainment facilities. It was the real entertainment street, also known as the Labyrinth City of Desire. Whenever people entered here, they would see the dense and bloated neon signs on both sides of the road, highlighting the prosperity and chaos of Kamichiro. This evening, Kamichiro had already shown signs of bustling. Men and women wearing fashionable clothes walked on the street. However, when they saw a completely black vehicle with a dragon's mark printed on the hood, they would immediately step out of the way respectfully, because everyone knew that this car was the exclusive car of the Rulon Group leader, Tong Senyuma. The Rulon Group was the extreme Dao organization in charge of this Kamichiro, and was also the underground master of this city. Even now that the leader Tong Senyuma had been in prison for a long time, because of the 3 consultants, the Rulon Group was still operating in an orderly manner, and no one dared to provoke its existence. Or on the surface, no one dared to provoke its existence. After passing through Kamichiro and going up a small slope, about 300 meters or so, you will reach an intersection and continue to go straight. Following this road for a few more intersections, you can see the headquarters of the Rulon Group. The huge Japanese-style courtyard. The open door at the entrance was imposing, and a plaque with the words Rulon hung on the door frame. But unlike other normal houses, there were a lot of surveillance cameras hanging on the wall outside the headquarters of the Rulon Group. From this large number of cameras, it could be seen that this imposing building was definitely not a group of ordinary people, but a special profession that needed to be on guard against the invasion of foreign enemies at any time. Finally back. This is the headquarters of the Rulon Group. After getting out of the car that originally belonged to the father of this body, team leader Tong Seiichi, Ryudo looked at the imposing door and could not help but feel a little nervous. After staying in this body for a period of time, the memories of the body slowly emerged. As the son of the leader of the Rulon group, Ryudo grew up in this mansion. This was his home. However, in his memory, his father rarely met with Ryudo. Most of the time, he was busy with the matters of the organization. His mother, Yumi, unfortunately passed away early. Ryudo could only see the gentle woman in the photo. Therefore, to Ryudo, this home was actually a place without any familial warmth. My father cared more about Rulon group than me, his son. With such thoughts in mind, Ryudo became extremely rebellious from a very young age. He almost gave up on himself and did all kinds of things outside. Fighting, smoking, bullying, stealing. It could be said that he did all kinds of bad things. But from the beginning, Ryudo's purpose was only to attract his father's attention. However, no matter how much Long-do misbehaved, his father Yima never added his son's name to the list of team members. In other words, Ryudo was not an official member of the Rulon group. He was not a brother in the true sense. Also, because he was unable to join the organization, this young master became even more anxious. My father did not let me join the organization because he felt that I was not broad-minded enough. So as long as I can do something earth-shattering, then he will definitely value me. Driven by this obsession, Ryudo was finally bewitched by Yamamoto and finally carried out the Missy kidnapping plan. And this young master's fate was to be beaten half to death last night, then tied to a stone and drowned in the Gulf of Tokyo. Until his death, he was not recognized by his father and was not allowed to join the organization. How should it be said? In the game, Ryudo Kiryo's character was undoubtedly disgusting. But when Ryudo learned about his past, he felt that this guy was just a hateful and pitiful unlucky guy. Seeing the young master standing at the door and staring at the plaque, Kawaii-nen asked in confusion, "Young master, why are you standing at the door and not going in? Weren't you in a hurry before?" "Ah, it's okay, carry those guys, let's go in." When he realized that he seemed to be standing in a strange place, Ryudo hurriedly strode into the door. "Ryudo Kiryo, go in peace, next leave it to me." Creak. Accompanied by the slight sound of the door being pushed open, Ryudo walked into the front door of the Rulon group, with two men carrying two bags on their shoulders. After entering the door, a Japanese-style courtyard appeared, with magnificent rockery and a pond, and a row of big trees planted along the wall was quite imposing. After seeing Ryudo, many servants and organization members also greeted him in a respectful tone. However, Ryudo just nodded slightly to them, but his eyes looked at the courtyard in the north of the mansion. The courtyard over there was where the three consultants of the Rulon group usually lived. That's right. The first thing Long-do did when he got home was to look for the three consultants and tell them everything that had happened last night. After all, among the three consultants, there was a traitor like Sakata Minoru. If he didn't get rid of him, Tenmu Iam's hand would still reach out to the Rulon group. At the same time, one of the three consultants that Ryudo missed, Sakata Minoru, was sitting in the room smoking a cigarette. He held his chin with his hand and was thinking about something. Sakata was a middle-aged man who always had a smile on his face, so much so that his facial muscles were stiff from smiling too much. He was short and chubby, and he didn't look like a brother of Hwagi-do. But insiders knew that this uncle, who was always smiling, was actually very scheming and ruthless. Hidden under the smiling mask was a black heart that was as black as coal. However, Sakata Minoru gave off a rather irritated feeling today, and those who had been with him for a long time could tell. And he naturally had a reason to be irritated, because the men he sent out last night included Yamamoto and the three Southeast Asian assassins. If the plan was successful, Sakata should have received the message, "Ryudo is dead soon," but he didn't. Then there was only one answer, and that was the plan failed because of some obstacles, and Yamamoto and the others might have been killed, or worse, directly fell into the hands of someone else. Boss Sakata, young Master Ryudo just came back. Just as Sakata was thinking about what to do next, a loyal subordinate opened the paper door and said to him in an urgent tone, Chapter 28. You're finally back. When Sakata heard the news, he wasn't surprised. After all, he already knew what was going on. When he didn't receive a response from Yamamoto last night, Sakata knew something bad was going to happen. Since Yamamoto and the 3 Southeast Asian assassins didn't respond, Ryudo returned to the Rulon group. This meant that the worst situation had occurred, and what he did would soon be known to the public. Of course, Sakata had already thought that such a day might come when he embarked on the path of colluding with the Tamiheim. Therefore, he made a lot of preparations early on to deal with the coming storm. Hiss. Huff. After taking a deep puff, Sakata Minoru stood up from the ground and said to his subordinate, "As previously arranged, gather all the members of the Sakata group and have them wait at the big house across the street." Yes. After receiving the boss's order, the subordinate immediately turned around and left without hesitation to inform the other members. In the large organization Rulon Group, there were many subordinate organizations. Among them, the 3 consultants each controlled a group. Because of the cooperation with the Tenmu Group, Sakata Minoru's manpower and financial resources far exceeded the other 2 groups, so the Sakata Group was also the most powerful organization in the Kamadachi area. Before changing his clothes and leaving, Sakata Minoru looked at the buildings in the Rulon Group headquarters with some nostalgia, then walked out without looking back. Unknowingly, I've been following Boss Ma for more than 20 years. Even this big house was built by the construction team that I was in charge of. But all of that would end today. From today onwards, there will be no more Sakata consultant of the Rulon Group, only the boss of the Sakata Group, Sakata Minoru. When he walked out of the door and walked toward the big house that he had secretly bought, the smile on Sakata Minoru's face had long disappeared. What was left was a bottomless murderous intent and malice. He knew that tonight, a bloody storm was bound to arise. And in this battle between Rulon Group and Sakata Group, the one who stood at the end was the leader of Kamadachi. At the same time, while Sakata was preparing for this battle, in the other side of the house, a conversation recorded on a mobile phone was slowly being played. "Lady Iam, what should we do next? Inform advisor Sakata to get someone to kill him." "Yes, then I won't disturb you any further." While Ryudo was playing the recording on his phone, the middle-aged man in an old-fashioned kimono, Fujiki Yoshio, who was sitting opposite him, remained silent. Tingmu was one of the 3 consultants of the Rulon Group. He was also one of Tong Sheng's most loyal subordinates. Working in the underworld for a long time made this middle-aged man's face look weather-beaten. When Ryudo came to his room and told him about what happened last night, Mr. Fujiki listened to the recording quietly without even blinking. What is this consultant thinking? From his expression, Ryudo couldn't see Fujiki's attitude toward this matter. Judging from the current situation, there was enough evidence to accuse Sakata of colluding with outsiders. Yamamoto's recording was enough to prove that Sakata and Iam colluded. As for the 3 Southeast Asian killers, as long as they followed the account of the money transfer and the usual contacts, they would be able to find clues related to Sakata. But after listening to the recording, Fujiki fell into deep thought for a few minutes. This situation made Ryudo feel a little confused. At the same time, he also felt that this guy had other intentions. How to put it? Although Fujiki's loyalty to the Rulon Group was unquestionable, Ryudo felt that he had never liked him. Logically speaking, Ryudo was the only blood relative of Tong Sheng, so Fujiki, as an old subordinate, should take care of him. But in fact, this was not the case. Fujiki Yoshio treated Ryudo as heir since he was a child, and basically didn't take the initiative to talk to him. So Ryudo always thought that consultant Fujiki hated him, although he didn't know why. Oh no, he doesn't think I'm framing him because he hates me, right? Looking at Fujiki's unchanging cold face, Ryudo couldn't help but sweat secretly. However, after 5 minutes, Fujiki raised his head slightly and looked at Ryudo sitting across from him. He slowly said, "I understand what you said. Sakata colluded with outsiders. This is an undeniable fact." "Uh-huh. Good. Then what should we do next?" When Ryudo heard Fujiki's answer, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then he smiled. Unexpectedly, Fujiki said without hesitation, Next, you go back to your room first. And then, take a shower, change your clothes, make a glass of milk, drink it, and have a good sleep. What about the next day? When you wake up the next day, everything will be over. Under Ryudo's incredulous gaze, Fujiki described in a firm tone. This plan sounded very easy for Ryudo. Ryudo didn't even have to do anything at all. He just had to wait in the room for the bloody storm to end. But after a few seconds, the expression on the dragon head's face changed from confusion to anger. And then he stood up abruptly. He said to Consultant Fujiki in a serious tone. What do you mean by this? Are you going to leave me alone? It's not that I want to leave you alone, but you're not a member of the Rulon group from the beginning, and you shouldn't have gotten involved at all. Although facing the young master's angry expression, Fujiki's words were still firm. There was a rule in Extreme Tao that could never be violated. That was the matters of the underworld must be solved by the underworld, and it must not involve ordinary people. At this time, Ryudo, who was not written on the Rulon group plate, was the ordinary person who should not be involved. However, after hearing Fujiki's words, Ryudo was so angry that he laughed. I shouldn't have gotten involved. Sakata already made a move on me. If it weren't for my good luck last night, I would be fish feed in Tokyo Bay now. So Sakata violated the rules, and we will punish him. You don't have to worry about this. When Fujiki looked at him like he was an outsider, Ryudo instinctively felt a strong sense of discomfort. When Kirishima Kazuma refused to let Ryudo join the organization, he also looked at him with the same gaze at his son. So Ryudo gritted his teeth and said angrily, Are you underestimating me too much? Do you think I'm not qualified to be involved in the Rulon group affairs? On the contrary, it's not that I don't think you're qualified to join the Rulon group, but I don't think we're qualified to accept your existence. What? After hearing Fujiki's strange answer, Ryudo couldn't help but make a sound of doubt. As if to solve his doubts, Fujiki took a puff from his pipe and asked solemnly, Young Master Ryudo, do you think Extreme Tao members are strong or weak? Do you still need to ask this? Of course they are strong. Wrong. Extreme Tao members are a group of weaklings. A group of weaklings at the bottom of society, weaker than the granny who sweeps the street. At this time, in front of Ryudo, the young master of Extreme Tao, Consultant Fujiki said in a firm tone. Chapter 29. Many people had a serious misunderstanding about the occupation of Extreme Tao. Ignorant people would think that they were very glorious, wandering the streets and alleys, working in many gray areas, committing all kinds of crimes, and being arrogant and despotic. However, in the eyes of old people like Tung Mu, Extreme Tao was a garbage occupation that would inevitably disappear in the future. It was also the weakest at the bottom of society. Many people couldn't understand why the tyrannical, fierce, and cunning Extreme Tao were considered weak. The reason was very simple. It was because from the day you became an Extreme Tao, it meant that you were much closer to death than ordinary people. If the average lifespan of an ordinary person was 70 or 80 years old, then the average lifespan of an Extreme Tao person was 30 or 40 years old at most. Therefore, those who became an Extreme Tao person would die early. This was not an individual phenomenon, but a collective phenomenon. Extreme Tao people like Tung Mu, who could live to 40 years old and still jump around outside, were very rare. After all, his companions in the same generation as him either died on the streets or were trapped in prison. In the natural world, those who couldn't survive were naturally weak. No matter how arrogant and despotic the members of Extreme Tao were, no matter how glorious they were always dancing on the tip of a knife. There would be a day when they would fall, when the bodies of Extreme Tao members rotted in the smelly gutters. Even the 80-year-old street sweeper next to them could dance on their bodies. How was such a group of people strong? If they lost their lives, what was the use of money, beautiful women, and reputation? Therefore, in Tung Mu's eyes, Extreme Tao was a very unpromising occupation. Most Extreme Tao members were weak people who couldn't sleep without using alcohol, drugs, women, and other things to numb themselves. Of course, there were very few men who carried out the path of chivalry, and were upright extreme Dao members, such as Tong Shunyima, the leader of the Rulong group. However, even such an iron-blooded man was framed by a villain and was imprisoned. He still had 30 years left in his sentence. 30 years was an exaggerated period of time for a human. It was still unknown whether Tong Shunyima could walk out of prison alive. Rotting in prison might be the fate of an extreme Dao member. It might even be the best fate. After all, he didn't have to die on the streets or die without a corpse. This was the sorrow of extreme Dao, but it was also the inevitability of extreme Dao. So, 16 years ago, on the day you were born, team leader told me that he would never let his son reach extreme Dao. He would never let his son go down the wrong path like him. Speaking of this, Fujiki picked up his pipe and took a puff. He looked at Ryuto with a warm gaze. So that's how it is. Is that how it is? After listening to Fujiki's explanation, Ryuto fell silent. He realized that he didn't understand his father and Fujiki's intentions at all. Ever since he was very young, his father had rarely interacted with him, mainly because he didn't want him to be involved in the world of the organization. As the leader of such a large organization, Tong Shunyima naturally knew that it was very difficult for his son to walk the normal path. But no matter how difficult it was, even if there was only a 1% chance, he still hoped that his son could be an ordinary person who didn't have to worry about dying at any time. Therefore, he never accepted Ryuto's request to join the organization. He even forcibly sent Ryuto to the most famous Dori First High School in Yodo. All of this was preparation for one day in the future to completely draw a line with his son. For Tong Shunyima, who was not good with words, this was all he could do for his son. Seeing that Ryuto was silent, Fujiki continued. Sakata must know that he can't deny this incident, but he won't wait for death. He will inevitably carry out fierce resistance, so you must not be involved. Fujiki was absolutely clear about Sakata's style of being a smiling tiger. Don't be fooled by this guy's usual good-natured and cheerful appearance. Tung Mu had long heard of the many things he did behind the back of the organization. But what Fujiki didn't expect was that Sakata's supporter would be the behemoth Tenmu group. The Sakata Gumi, that was supported by the Tenmu group, would definitely quickly gather today and establish a new power. In order to cover up the dirty things he had done, Sakata would most likely directly attack the headquarters of the Rulong group tonight and kill everyone inside. Therefore, what would happen next would be an extreme death match where blood would be washed in blood. It would be a genuine dark battlefield. In this extreme situation, even Fujiki didn't know if he could live to see the sun tomorrow. Therefore, he couldn't let Ryuto get involved. Otherwise, if something went wrong and the leader's bloodline was cut off here, Fujiki wouldn't have the face to face the leader when they met again in the underworld. After understanding everything, Ryuto nodded and smiled. I understand. You finally understand? That's great. Fujiki also felt relieved when he heard this, and a smile appeared on his rigid face. After leaving Fujiki's room, Ryuto quickly went to an empty corner, took out his mobile phone, and dialed a phone number that he got not long ago. Daidu. Hello, have you decided what you want me to do so quickly, young master? The moment the phone was connected, an old voice came from the other side, but it seemed to contain a powerful voice. Yeah, I want to ask you to help me kill someone. Someone? Who? Don't worry, it's an extreme leader who deserves to die. If you leave him alone, hundreds of casualties will be caused because of him. Okay. Then let's meet first. I'll send you the location later. Daidu. After hanging up the phone, Ryuto took a deep breath and walked toward a small warehouse outside his room. Opening the side door of the warehouse, Ryuto saw the two brothers, Tomo and Kawaki, and 4 figures tied up with tortoiseshell on the ground. Young master, you're back. Seeing Ryuto push the door and enter, the Kamita brothers immediately stood up and bowed respectfully to him. Tomo, change into my clothes and sit in my room to play games. If someone knocks on the door, play this recording. Immediately, Long Do threw the paper bag containing his clothes that he had just taken from the room, along with a small recording device, to the male lead. Don't bother me. It's so noisy. When Tomo pressed the play button of the recording device, such a violent recording came out. "Young master, what are you doing? You want me to be your substitute?" "Yes, Tomo, you will be my substitute in my room. Kawaki, you go and deal with these 3 killers. As for this guy, leave him to me." Looking at Yamamoto, who fell to the ground and was looking at him with fear, Ryudo slowly walked over and lifted the guy's head like a dog. Chapter 30. Did Ryudo understand what Advisor Fujiki said before? Of course he understood. Whether it was the concern of Kazuma Kirima's father or Advisor Fujiki, Ryudo had received it. But unfortunately, he couldn't stay away from the Rulon group, like the 2 elders wanted him to, and try to live an ordinary life. The reason was very simple. Because Tenmu Ayam would never let him go. And there was still a Kanzaki-colored glaze to save. Ryudo was also quite familiar with Ayam's personality. If she found out that the person she ordered to kill was still alive and kicking, she definitely wouldn't let him go. In other words, if Ryudo left the protection of the Rulon group, he would only die faster. Furthermore, without the influence of this organization, Ryudo wouldn't be able to confront the Kanzaki family, and it would be even more impossible for him to rescue Ruri within 2 years. Therefore, no matter from any perspective, Ryudo needed the Rulon group. The most important thing was that he needed a Rulon group in a healthy state, not a crippled organization that was torn apart by civil war. According to Fujimoto's inference just now, the old dog Sakata also knew that the matter had been exposed, so he would definitely counterattack in a desperate situation. Because the Sakata group had the support of the Tenma group, whether it was manpower or equipment, they were all top-notch. If a full-scale war really started, even if the Rulon group won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. But fortunately you're here, it's much easier now. However, at this moment, Ryudo grabbed Yamamoto's hair and dragged him out like a dead dog. As if he thought he was going to be dragged out and killed, Yamamoto twisted his body frantically and struggled. "Don't be noisy, what you did was not enough to kill you 10 times, but congratulations, you now have new value." Oh. Under Yamamoto's baffled gaze, Ryudo dragged him to a wall not far away. The headquarters of the Rulon group was Ryudo's home, so he was very familiar with everything here. Especially since this young master had been a playboy since he was young, he often sneaked out to play. It was easy for him to sneak out without anyone noticing. Therefore, after arranging for the male puppet to be his substitute, Ryudo carried Yamamoto and left the headquarters of Ryu Group and ran towards the street not far away. As for the 3 Southeast Asian assassins, they were meant to be used as evidence. Now that Sakata had rebelled, there was no need for evidence. He could just get Kawaki-nan to dig a hole and bury him. In any case, the 3 of them had taken Ryudo's first blood, so their deaths were not to be regretted. At the same time, while Ryudo was quietly carrying out his plan behind the back of the Rulon group, a large house on the other side of the street was already full of people. People who often hang out in the Kamashido area must have seen these faces often. Some of them wore suits, some wore shirts, and some wore vests, but all of them had a fierce look on their faces. Wolf's Den. There was no doubt that a group of hungry wolves gathered here at this time, and this big house naturally became a wolf's den. Although it was not complete, these more than 100 members of the Sakata group were the elite forces under Sakata Minoru. However, after the boss gathered everyone, he held a plaque in his hand that shocked everyone. Because on the huge wooden plaque, the words Sakata Group Headquarters were neatly written. As everyone knew, the Sakata Group was a division of the Rulon Group and belonged to the second-level organization. Of course, it could not hang the headquarters sign used by the top level, unless Sakata Minoru planned to take people out to establish his own gang and leave the Rulon Group. This knowledge was well known to those who had been in the underworld for a long time. So basically, everyone who could come here already knew the purpose of the boss when they saw the plaque. No way, Sakata boss is really planning to leave the Rulon Group and start his own gang. When everyone realized this, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became very heavy. No one dared to breathe loudly for fear of igniting this strange atmosphere. After all, in the world of Extreme Dipper, establishing another gang was not a simple matter, and it could lead to serious bloody disputes at any moment. Everyone, I believe that when you see this plaque, you already understand. After a while, Sakata Minoru straightened his back and said with a gentle smile on his face. He turned his head and looked at the wooden plaque, smiled and said, "From now on, the Sakata group will leave the Rulon group and establish our own gang in Kamashido." Sure enough, although everyone had guessed this, when they heard Sakata boss say it openly, many people's faces suddenly changed. At this moment, I, Sakata Minoru, have nothing to do with the Rulon group, and there may even be a conflict. But Sakata didn't seem to care about the atmosphere below at all, and continued to say, "But I won't force you. If anyone wants to leave, walk out of this door now, and we'll be strangers in the future. What? If you don't want to follow, you can leave now." In an instant, someone looked at the open door behind them. There was no doubt that a considerable number of members were unwilling to leave the Rulon group. After all, if they followed Sakata boss, it was foreseeable that they would inevitably encounter a series of bloody battles, and the probability of survival was extremely low. So a young man wanted to stand up and raise his hand, but he was stopped by a senior next to him. "Brother Matsuhara? Don't leave at this time if you don't want to die." Under the young man's puzzled gaze, the old man next to him who knew Sakata's character shook his head. "I'm sorry. I want to leave." In the next second, there was finally another younger member who couldn't hold it in anymore. He raised his hand and bowed to Sakata boss, who was standing above him, and then quickly walked towards the door. When this first precedent appeared, everyone's eyes were focused on him until this young team member left the door and his figure disappeared. What? Didn't nothing happen? Seeing the young member leave, the young man who wanted to raise his hand was relieved. But before he could completely exhale, a truck suddenly rushed out not far from the door. With the speed of a clap of thunder, it slammed into the other side. Accompanied by a scream and the sound of something being smashed, the faces of the people in the room who wanted to leave suddenly turned pale. "Is there anyone else who wants to leave? If you want to do it as soon as possible." Under Sakata's gentle gaze, no one else chose to leave. This also meant that a new organization, the Sakata group, was formed, and a large-scale war with the Rulon group could begin at any time. Chapter 31. In the evening of the same day, a storm was brewing in the Kamadachi area, and the traffic on the street was much less than usual. Women who worked in nightclubs gathered in groups of 3 to 5, nervously and excitedly chatting about the latest news they just heard from their friends. Although the sound in by Ching Ji's pinball shop was still as noisy as before, the players who lingered in the shop would occasionally look out of the window, fearing that some uninvited guests would appear. Some of the more timid bars even directly closed their doors to avoid becoming a battlefield in the upcoming conflict. Indeed, the people who often came to the Kamadachi area were very sensitive, and almost all of them had smelled the scent of blood that was about to sweep over. But this was also very normal. After all, the huge organization that controlled the entire street, the Rulon group, had a split, and it was impossible for such a big matter not to be leaked. Now many people already knew that Sakata was planning to lead his men to prepare for independence, and Fujimoto's side would not give up. And as both sides continued to gather their forces, the tension of the imminent battle also stimulated everyone's nerves. Could they stop the outbreak of this battle? It was probably difficult after all. Sakata had already done everything, and there was no turning back. Unless Sakata Minoru, who was preparing to establish his own faction, suddenly died before the battle began. In that case, they could naturally turn big things into small things and small things into nothing. But Sakata also knew that many people were watching him, so the protection around him was also very tight. Was there really someone who could kill that old bastard Sakata, under the protection of over 100 elite Apex experts? The answer was yes. So that's how it is, I understand the whole story. Not long after, When the sky was dark, an old butler in a suit stood in the courtyard of a residential building hundreds of meters away from the Sakata mansion and nodded slightly. Although he wasn't young anymore, it wasn't impossible for him to take the head of an enemy in the middle of an army of thousands of soldiers and horses. It just so happened that he owed Ryudo a request, so he called the old butler of Kansai over. There may be many people in the world who could stop everything at this juncture, but Ryudo could only call this one person to help. Butler Bunnyball, when can we do it? Can you deal with it tonight? Similarly, in the backyard of the first floor of the residential building, Ryudo looked at the trustworthy figure and couldn't help but feel relieved. After all, the person beside Ryudo was the strongest helper in the game, Cat House Bunnyball. With this guy's help, Sakata Minoru would be nothing more than a fat pig waiting to be slaughtered. However, Rabbit Ball pondered for a moment before replying seriously. I don't think we can do it tonight. We lack enough information, and the other party has too many guards around them. It's hard to get close. Ryudo's request was to only kill Sakata Minoru and spare the rest if possible. At this moment, Sakata Minoru was under the protection of many of his subordinates, and it would be difficult to deal with him alone. According to Bunnyball's usual style, he would follow the target and gather information for a period of time. After finding out the target's pattern of movement, he would look for a time when the guards were the weakest. Of course, this was also the standard practice of assassins throughout history. Those who chopped their way in with an axe were clearly not assassins. However, Bunnyball's usual practice was slightly different from Ryudo's request. After all, if there were no accidents, the Sakatagumi would start a war with the Rulon group tonight. If the problem wasn't solved in the next few hours, there would be a large number of casualties. Butler Bunnyball, I actually have a plan. You can take a look at it and see if it's feasible. At this time, Ryudo pointed at the man he threw on the ground not far away, Yamamoto. There was no doubt that Yamamoto was a person who deserved to die. Not only did he betray the Rulon group, but he also wanted to kill his own young master, Ryudo. No matter which crime it was enough for this guy to die 8 to 10 times. Although killing this guy would be satisfying for a while, the reality of the problem would not change. Therefore, instead of killing Yamamoto, Ryudo planned to use him to carry out a plan called Trojan Horse. The core element of this plan was to get Yamamoto to bring Ryudo and Rabimaru into the Sakata mansion under the guise of escaping on his own. Then, he would take the opportunity to approach Sakata and deliver a fatal blow. Although Sakata had many subordinates, there were only a few diehards, and most of them were just neutral. As long as that guy died, Ryudo, as the next leader of the Rulon group, would be able to take over the group of ownerless soldiers. Just like this, the war would end, and the Sakata group would disappear on the spot. Everything would be fine. After listening to Ryudo's plan, Bunnyball nodded and said in an admiring tone, I see. Going into the tiger's den, young Master Ryudo, you are really brave. Needless to say, for a 16-year-old boy, Ryudo was really brave, as if he didn't know how to write the word death. But in fact, he did know how to write this word, and he had personally written it 3 times. RIP. After describing the plan, Ryudo came in front of Yamamoto and tore off the tape on his mouth. How about it? Yamamoto, did you hear it clearly? Do you want to do this job or not? If you can promise to let me go after it's over. Yamamoto was also an experienced person, so he naturally knew that he couldn't say no. Otherwise, he would die on the spot. What he really cared about was his own fate after it was over. Don't worry. Ryudo nodded and said to him seriously, I swear on the reputation of the Rulon group leader, Kiryu Kazuma, that as long as you leave Kamadachi, after it's over, our Rulon group will never harm you. For Yamamoto, this was already a very generous condition, so he naturally had no reason to refuse. Even for those extreme Taoists who were known for their loyalty, their awareness was usually just a little bit bigger than their noses. So not long after, 3 familiar figures appeared at the door of the Sakata mansion that was heavily guarded. Yamamoto, how did you come back? Isn't this Ryudo Kiryu? Looking down from the second-floor balcony of the mansion, Sakata thought he was mistaken when he saw the familiar faces of Yamamoto and Ryuto. When he learned that Yamamoto was captured and brought to the Rulon Group headquarters, he thought that Yamamoto was dead, but in fact he was not. Not only did this guy come back, but he also brought such a valuable gift. The only blood relative of the Rulon Group leader? Ryuto Kiryu. Chapter 32. The Sakata Mansion was another mansion that Sakata secretly purchased on the street of the Rulon Group headquarters. The mansion's courtyard was large, but it was already filled with people. Dozens of people in various outfits, with fierce eyes, tattoos on their backs and weapons in their hands, gathered in a group. They surrounded Ryuto, Yamamoto, and an inconspicuous man in black. The owner of the mansion, Sakata Minoru, stood on the second-floor balcony and looked down at the scene below. Even in this situation, there were still two bald men standing in front of Sakata. Their burly bodies almost broke through the restraints of their suits. The scar on their faces showed that they had experienced something unusual. Their eagle-like eyes and murderous posture were enough to make thieves wet their pants. These two guys are real professionals. I can't believe Sakata has such masters under his command. When he saw the two bald men, the inconspicuous man in black standing behind Long Do raised his eyebrows slightly. While being surrounded, Yamamoto forced a smile and said to his boss, "Yes, it's him, Ryuto Kiryu, the good son of the leader, hehe." At this time, Ryu's mouth and hands were wrapped in bandages. He was held in Yamamoto's hand like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. On the second-floor balcony, Sakata revealed a strange smile and asked, "Yamamoto, how did you escape from the headquarters?" "Well, this brat wanted to retaliate against me, so I caught him, and if you do it, kill them." Before Yamamoto finished, Sakata yawned and ordered his men without hesitation. The order came so suddenly that Yamamoto's expression changed drastically. Seeing Sakata's order, Yamamoto quickly shouted at the top of his lungs, "Wait! Boss Sakata! I still have something to say." "You still have something to say? Don't make a fool of yourself. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? After glancing at Yamamoto, Sakata shook his head with a regretful expression. To be honest, for Sakata, who had been in the underworld for decades, he had seen countless schemes and tricks, and he was also an expert at playing tricks. So when he saw Yamamoto come back alive from the Rulon Group headquarters, he already understood what was going on. Basically, they let Yamamoto come in as a spy, and then they worked with him from the inside. Wasn't this strategy at the level of a 3-year-old? Perhaps there was something wrong with his IQ. Although it was admirable for the Ryukyu group to have the guts to join forces with Tongsheng Ryujin, it wouldn't work on Sakata. He wouldn't believe it at all. This, seeing that Boss Sakata's face was getting worse and worse, Yamamoto could not help but gasp for breath. After a few seconds, he slowly raised his head and said, "Boss Sakata, you are right. I did come here to pretend to surrender." MMM. When he heard this, Ryuto next to him began to struggle violently. "Shut up." Yamamoto punched Ryuto in the abdomen and knocked him to the ground. Looking at the sudden internal struggle below, Sakata leisurely lit a cigarette and asked in an interested tone, "And then? They said if I cooperated, they would let me go. They asked me to bring this kid in and pretend to surrender. But in fact, I would cooperate with them to assassinate you, Sakata-sama." "Oh, assassinate me? So that's what they were planning." Hearing this, Sakata's expression remained unchanged. He pointed to the young man in black next to Yamamoto and asked, "Who is this?" "This is the assassin who came to kill you. As long as he enters the room, he will." Before Yamaguchi could finish his sentence, the man in black behind him had already rushed toward him without a word. He also had a sharp dagger in his hand. However, Yamamoto was no pushover. With a beautiful grab, he held down the dagger that was stabbing at him. Then, he turned around and stabbed the dagger into the black-clothed assassin's abdomen. In front of dozens of people, the assassin who was sent to assassinate Sakata fell to the ground, blood flowing everywhere. Clap, 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 clap. At this moment, Sakata on the second-floor balcony clapped his hands in satisfaction and smiled. Well done, congratulations, Yamamoto. You have once again gained my initial trust. Phew. Yamamoto took a deep breath and said respectfully. Because I know that following them will have a better future. Smart. Bring that brat Longdo in. Since the eldest young master is here, we have to properly greet him, hee. After leaving behind a burst of malicious laughter, Sakata walked into the second-floor hall with two of his men and waited for the opening of a new game. Whoa. Whoa. When Yamamoto pulled him into the mansion, Ryudo was still struggling, and the other extreme dios around him looked at the former young master with regret. They were all members of the former Rulon group, and naturally knew Ryudo Kiryu. From the beginning, most of the team members joined because they admired the extreme ninja Tong Shungikiyoma. They loved young master Ryudo more or less because of him, but now that the Rulon group and the Sakata Gumi had completely turned against each other, Ryudo would be doomed after being caught in the mansion. Even Sakata, that smiling tiger, might use very cruel means to torture and kill this young master after capturing him. When they thought of this, many people couldn't help but turn their heads. But there was nothing they could do. They could only carry the body lying on the ground and throw it to the warehouse. When the sky darkened a little, they loaded it into a truck and transported it to the mountains to bury it. That was all. Two young Sakata Gumi members were sent to perform this task. They carried the body to the warehouse, while complaining about why they always had to do this kind of chores. But after entering the warehouse in the corner of the mansion, the complaints quickly disappeared. Soon after, a young man, wearing the clothes of one of the young members, slowly walked out of the warehouse. He looked at the structure of the mansion next to him, then stepped on the air conditioner next to him, and jumped directly to the window on the second floor. From the time they entered the house, 3 minutes and 27 seconds had passed. Please don't die, young Master Ryudo. When he pried open the window from the outside and stepped into the mansion, he put on makeup to make himself look more like a young man's cat house. He wiped the ketchup off his body and quickly ran into the inner hall. Chapter 33. When he was taken into the hall, Ryudo secretly revealed a happy smile, but the smile was covered by tape. As the specially modified steel door that was difficult to break open from the outside slowly closed, Ryudo appeared in front of a magnificent hall. The floor of the hall was as smooth as a mirror, and there were magnificent hanging lights above. There were also many expensive paintings and animal head specimens on the walls. In short, this was a mansion belonging to the nouveau riche. Although the owner of the mansion was rich, he didn't know how to use it properly and could only make a clumsy imitation. Young Master Ryudo, this is all I can help you with. You can do the rest yourself. Before handing Ryudo over to a few of Sakata's subordinates, Yamamoto whispered in Ryudo's ear. Indeed, Yamamoto was taken to another room and didn't follow him to the second floor. It was clear that Sakata was still somewhat guarded against him. The plan was successful up to this point. Yamamoto's jumping left and right to change sides, and Rabimara's failing to fight and getting killed, were all part of the plan. After all, Sakata was an old fox. If he didn't do this, it would be quite difficult to sneak in. The courtyard was full of people. But no matter what, Ryudo came in, and Rabimara would soon sneak in. So when the two black-clothed Jidao escorted him to the second floor, Ryudo's mood was actually quite good. But he didn't notice that the young man on his left secretly put his left hand into his pocket as he went upstairs. Sorry. To repay the favor, I can only do this. The three of them walked to a corner on the second floor. When they saw Sakata's study 100 meters away, a sudden change occurred. The young man on the left with the scar on his face, who looked quite fierce, raised a stun baton without hesitation and slammed it to the right. Poof! Before the black-clothed man on the right, who was escorting Ryudo, could react, he was already knocked down by the scar-faced man, without even making a sound. What's going on? Internal strife? Ryudo was a little confused when he saw the two people who were escorting him suddenly start fighting. Young Master Ryudo, let's go quickly. Jump out of the window over there. and climb over the wall to reach the street. You'll be safe then. The knife-scarred man who suddenly released his colleague spoke as quickly as he could as he removed the tape on Ryuto's hand. Ah, so that's how it is. Are they on my side? Hearing this, Ryuto finally understood what the Scarface man was trying to do. Could it be that this guy was in Chow Chow's camp, but his heart was elsewhere? No, strictly speaking, it was not that he was in the Chow camp, but his heart was in the Han camp. It was just that the eldest brother suddenly raised the banner and started the Yellow Turban Uprising, which inexplicably involved him. When the tape on Ryuto's mouth was torn off, he immediately said, "Bro, you'll die if you do this." If Ryuto left like this, whether he could leave was another matter, but the knife-scarred man would definitely not live to see tomorrow. Extreme Dao used the most terrifying methods on traitors, especially Sakata, who was a great traitor. It doesn't matter. Even if I die, I won't regret it. Why? Aren't you afraid of death? I've already chosen the wrong path and become a rotten person, but I don't want to make the same mistake again and become trash that is worse than a rotten person. At this point, a trace of determination flashed in the knife-scarred man's eyes. It had to be said that this kid's style and loyalty were admirable, but the problem was that it seemed to be used at the wrong time. So Ryuto immediately said, "Wait, I'm not leaving. Just take me in to find Sakata." "Young Master Ryuto, if you go in you'll be killed." "Someone will be killed, but the person who will be killed won't be me." "This, could it be? Young Master Ryuto is." Suddenly, the knife-scarred man seemed to understand something. After all, he was also in the underworld, so he could understand in 1 or 2 sentences. At the same time, he seemed to see the back of the heavy mountain that blocked in front of him 5 years ago. It was a rainy night. The knife-scarred man had a falling out with his brothers in the firm, and was chased all the way to Kamishimachi. I'm dead. When he was surrounded by more than a dozen people, the knife-scarred man could not help but smile bitterly. However, the man who appeared from the dark street not far away saved him. "Who are you? How dare you meddle in our business?" "Get lost, Kamishimachi is not a place you should set foot in." The man used a faint tone to speak imposing words, and his words were full of unquestionable meaning. More than a dozen strong men could not say a word in front of him, and could only leave in embarrassment. This was the opportunity for the knife-scarred man to join the Rulon group, because he admired the group leader so much. At that time, the group leader of the Rulon group exuded a strong aura, as if he did not think that he would die at all. At this time, the son of the dragon, young Master Ryuto, exuded an aura very similar to that of Kiryu Ikiyama, whom the knife-scarred man encountered at that time. Sure enough, like father like son, it seems that he was not caught. But he planned to take the initiative to kill Sakata? After understanding this, the knife-scarred man immediately said, "I'm Narukai Otani. I'm willing to die for you. You really want to help? You may die. The path of a hero is death without life." Very good. It seems that this man is trustworthy. After sensing Otani's determination to face death with equanimity, Long Do reached out and patted him on the shoulder. Time passed by minute, and more than a minute had passed since Ryuto entered the mansion. More than a minute, walking from the first floor to the second floor, and opening the door of the study should be enough. What's going on? Why haven't they come in yet? At the same time, Sakata, who had been waiting with a dumbbell in the spacious study for a long time, felt that something was wrong. So he said to the bodyguard number 1 beside him, "Go outside and see what Ryuto is doing." "Yes, I'm going." Boom. Before the bald bodyguard number 1 walked out, the door of the study was knocked open with a muffled noise. What? Sakata and the 2 bodyguards immediately looked over, and happened to see the scene of Ryuto rolling and getting up from the ground. And the one who rushed in after him was Narukai Otani. "Otani, what the hell are you doing?" Sakata immediately frowned and asked when he saw this strange scene. "Sorry, Sakata boss, this kid just wanted to run and knocked out Yoshino." Yoshino was the black-clothed man, who had just escorted Ryuto to the second floor with Otani. From Sakata's point of view, he could just see Yoshino's figure on the ground. "Brat, you dare to resist? I'll knock out your teeth one by one." After taking a look at Ryudo, Sakata walked over with a special long dumbbell that weighed 15 kilograms. Chapter 34. There were many weapons that Japanese extreme Dao liked to use. Daggers, clubs, pistols, katanas, taser, and so on. But Sakata was different. His favorite weapon was dumbbells. And they were specially made long dumbbells. From the side, the dumbbells in his hands were no different from small dumbbells. The half-meter long handle was thin and long, and the round ends on both sides were heavy and large. This thing that weighed 15 kilograms was Sakata's little toy, and it was also his favorite baton to hit people's heads with. Among the older generation of extreme Dao, Sakata was not particularly good at fighting, but he was particularly brutal. When he reached middle age, he liked to work out, and then he fell in love with the feeling of hitting people with fitness equipment. For example, the especially large dumbbells in Sakata's hands. When hit, the brain matter would fly a few meters away. Be careful, young Master Ryudo. Sakata has a strange strength. If this thing hits someone, they will die. Seeing Sakata pick up the dumbbells and walk toward Ryudo, although Otani retreated to the side, he still watched nervously. Although he had entered the study, he could not act rashly. After all, the two bodyguards behind him were still watching his every move. If Otani made a move, he would probably die on the spot. Damn it, he still doesn't treat people as people, but as if he was looking at his prey. After secretly glancing at the two unknown bodyguards, Otani could not help but tremble slightly. Not everyone in the Sakata group really obeyed Sakata, but no one dared to resist. Other than Sakata's huge power, the biggest reason was the existence of the two bald bodyguards. These two guys, how should he put it, were monsters in the extreme Dao. Judging from the information that Sakata boss accidentally revealed when he was drunk, the two of them came from the Middle East battlefield and were mercenaries who fought on the battlefield since young. This also caused the strength of the two bodyguards to be on a completely different level compared to ordinary extreme Dao. Even if they were unarmed, a dozen or 20 extreme Dao would not be their match. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Young Master Ryudo, I didn't expect you to be so daring. You actually dared to follow Yamamoto and barge in. When Sakata came to Ryudo's side, he raised the dumbbells in his hands as he spoke, and when he said the last two words, he suddenly swung the dumbbells down. The 15 kilograms of iron was swung vigorously, and this time, it was aimed at Ryudo's leg. He intended to cripple his leg. Although Sakata was fast, Ryudo's reaction was not slow either. He quickly rolled on the ground and rolled to the side in an unsightly posture to avoid Sakata's heavy blow. But before Long Do could stabilize himself, a gust of strong wind suddenly blew from behind him. Long Do hurriedly raised his right hand to block, and then half of his body was kicked into the air. The one who attacked from behind was naturally one of Sakata's two bodyguards. The slightly shorter bodyguard dodged quickly like a ghost, and his right leg swept towards Ryudo's neck like a whip. The speed of the kick was completely at the level of a professional grandmaster of combat, and the position of the kick was also quite lethal. What a heavy kick! But he could still withstand it. The moment he was kicked, Ryudo felt like he was hit by a motorcycle, but his tough and powerful arms were only slightly red and swollen, not completely broken. After all, in terms of physical condition, Ryudo's physical attributes were also at the professional level. In fact, there was not much difference between him and the two mercenaries, although the difference in actual combat experience and combat skills was like heaven and earth. You actually dared to dodge, how naughty. Seeing Ryudo slowly stand up from the ground, Sakata, who walked over with the dumbbells, revealed a terrifying smile. The two of you, hold this little demon in place so that I don't miss again. I have to slowly break the 200, how many bones in his body. Hearing Sakata's hesitation about the number of bones, Ryudo did not hesitate to mock. It's 206, idiot. Is that so? It doesn't matter, after all. Your bones will become 512, because they're all cracked. As Sakata pointed, the two mercenaries quickly came behind Ryudo, one on the left and one on the right, and pressed down on his shoulders. With Long Do's current strength, He wouldn't be able to defeat the two of them in a one-on-one battle, let alone if the two of them were to gang up on him. When Ryudo was firmly pinned down, Sakata also shook his arm and raised the dumbbells, ready to break the wrist. Which bone do you want to start with? Finger bones are healed. They say that the 10 fingers are connected to the heart. If I crush your finger bones one by one, I guarantee that you'll be in so much pain that you'll want to kill yourself on the spot. Looking at Ryudo's slender fingers, Sakata showed an excited expression. Here's the chance. Do it. But the moment Sakata raised the dumbbells, Otani, who had been watching from a distance, suddenly reached out and took out a black pistol from his clothes. This black pistol was the final weapon that Ryudo gave him before entering the door. If Sakata and the two bodyguards focus their attention on me, just shoot, don't hesitate. As a member of Extreme Path, Otani was not a novice who had never fired a gun before. He quickly raised the pistol and pointed it at Sakata's head, then quickly pulled the trigger. Bang! But the moment Otani pulled the trigger, a gunshot sounded in advance. The flying bullet cut through the air and directly pierced a bloody hole in Otani's right palm, and the pistol in his hand naturally fell to the ground from the huge impact. How is this possible? There's actually a third bodyguard. Before Otani turned his head, a figure holding a gun appeared in the mural next to him. This scene suddenly scared Otani, and Ryudo, who was not far away, couldn't help but grit his teeth. Sorry, Otani. I didn't say that I only have 2 bodyguards. Although Sakata didn't even turn his head, he seemed to have seen everything that happened behind him. In fact, from the beginning, Sakata knew that Otani was not reliable, who asked the shape of the pistol in his clothes to be so obvious. If you want to hide a gun next time, it's best to hide it at the waist of your pants and cover it with your clothes. But you won't have a next time. Having said that, Sakata made a gesture behind him without turning his head, and suddenly raised the dumbbells and smashed them at Ryudo's arm. Is it over? At this moment, Otani felt the murderous intent of the small bodyguard who had been hiding in the dark next to him. He would immediately pull the trigger and kill Narukai Otani, just like crushing an ant. In desperation, Otani could only sigh and prepare to turn around and make a final struggle, whoosh. However, at the last moment when Otani was about to turn around, accompanied by a slight sound, a slender long needle flew out of nowhere and pierced the small bodyguard's inner wrist. Chapter 35. The momentum of this long needle was truly untraceable. It wasn't until the short bodyguard pulled the trigger and realized that he couldn't exert any force with his fingers that he realized he had been hit. My fingers can't move? In an instant, the short bodyguard lowered his head and looked at his right wrist. He looked at the long needle inserted into the acupoint. However, how could Otani, who was not far away, let go of this heaven-sent opportunity? He let out a tiger-like howl, quickly pounced over, and punched the short bodyguard in the chin. This punch could be said to be quite standard, and the position of the punch was completely correct. With a single punch, the unlucky bodyguard felt as if the world had turned upside down. His entire body fell limply to the ground. This was a hidden weapon. When he noticed the strange movement over there, one of the bodyguards holding down Ryudo immediately let go of him, but kicked out the Sakata boss who had raised the dumbbell in front of him. What? Sakata was prepared to smash Ryudo's bones with his hammer, but he did not expect to be kicked by his own bodyguard. However, the moment he was kicked out, he understood the reason. That was because a long needle was flying toward Sakata's throat. After losing its target, it stuck into the wall not far away. The flying needle pierced into the wall. What kind of terrifying strength was this? Who were they? Who's outside? For a moment, everyone's eyes unconsciously looked towards the corridor outside the broken door. The one standing there was a very young man in black clothes. Although this black-clothed man was young, in the eyes of the 2 mercenary bodyguards who had experienced life-and-death situations, he was as terrifying as a demon from hell. Even the other mercenary who was fighting the dragon couldn't help but tense up when he saw this uninvited guest who suddenly barged into the battle. This guy is not simple. He must have experienced countless battles. Puffed. But before he could finish his thoughts, a fist landed on his abdomen. The huge force passed through his thick muscles and acted on his internal organs, causing the mercenary to squat down. Do you think I'm dead? It's fine if you just look over there without looking at me. It was Ryuto Kiryu who seized this opportunity to make a move. He did not look at the person in the corridor. After all, he already knew who that person was. After fiercely punching the mercenary beside him, Ryuto quickly broke free from the hand that was pressed down. He turned his head and grabbed the mercenary's head and pressed it down. At the same time, Long Do's right knee also quickly went up. He was actually planning to give this old man a head-pressing knee strike. If this hit were to land, not to mention his face, even his head would be smashed into smithereens. However, this mercenary was still a professional. At the last moment, he reached out his hand to block his face, and was only hit with dizziness. You really came at the right time. Are you doing this on purpose? After casually kicking the mercenary away, Ryuto quickly retreated to Otani's side and picked up the gun dropped by the short bodyguard on the ground. I didn't do it on purpose. It's just that the guys outside were a little slow and didn't immediately carry me into the warehouse. The person who suddenly entered the battlefield was naturally Ryuto's biggest reliance, guardian ninja Tomoya Bunkomaru. After he pretended to be dead and sneaked into the mansion, he quickly knocked out the scattered enemies on the first floor and used a heavy object to block the door from the inside. If one walked to the window, it was not difficult to hear some noise coming from outside. After all, there were several gunshots from the study on the second floor. It was impossible for the nearly 100 Sakata Gumi members to not notice. Unfortunately, Sakata deliberately designed his door to be a steel door for fear of being attacked. Even a car might not be able to break it open. So when Bunkomaru blocked the door from the inside and came to the study, everything was over. Ryuto had a gun in his hand, and Bunkomaru had a needle in his hand. With just Sakata and his 2 mercenary bodyguards, there was no way they could survive in this situation. In fact, only 3 minutes later, Sakata fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The 2 mercenaries who were used as amulets collapsed on the ground, and a black muzzle was pointed at Sakata's head. It's over. It's all over. Sakata would never have dreamed that his idea of dragging Ryudo in to torture him to death would end up being a death sentence. Well done. I have to say, I underestimated you. When Sakata knew he was about to die, he took out a pipe from his pocket and took a deep puff. The pipe was not lit, so naturally, no smoke came out. But Sakata didn't seem to care. Ryudo pointed the gun at Sakata's head. His eyes were like torches and asked sternly, "Before I kill you, I want to ask a question. Why did I betray the Rulon group ? Yes, the leader treated you well. Why did you betray him? Probably because the leader is too good." What? Ryudo looked surprised, as if he didn't expect such a strange answer. In our line of work, it's rare to see someone as perfect as the leader. When Sakata mentioned the man, he couldn't help but bite the pipe. The leader is strong, handsome, and has the temperament of a leader and a heart of justice. He is a true hero, and no one in the industry doesn't admire him. Then why did you do it? When you saw the statue of God, did you try to push it down? I did, and not every time. Sakata suddenly laughed, and at the same time, he bit down harder on the pipe, so hard that it made a crunching sound. It was precisely because Kurosei Kazuma was too perfect that Sakata wanted to destroy him, or rather, destroy the foundation he had worked so hard for. Is this strange malice out of jealousy, or something else? Even Sakata didn't know. For a long time, Sakata didn't tell anyone about his thoughts until he met that man. Since birth, humans were the amalgamation of countless malice. You don't need to feel ashamed when you discover the strong malice in your heart. The ones who should feel ashamed are the humans who bound their natural evil with various chains. After accidentally meeting that man and chatting with her for a few minutes, Sakata seemed to have found his true self. From then on, Sakata let go of everything and began to carry out his own evil. I really want to see the wise leader's expression when he learns that the Rulon group has been torn apart and his son was thrown into the Gulf of Tokyo to feed the fish. Ha 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 ha. Even when death was near, Sakata still didn't have the slightest remorse, only some regret. Seeing that distorted face, Otani couldn't help but want to vomit. That's enough. Thank you for your honesty. Ryudo laughed as he dragged the man from the ground and dragged him to the second-floor balcony not far away. Chapter 36. As for Sakata, Ryudo didn't need to think much to know why he became like this. The reason was simple. Half of it was because of the malice in his heart, and the other half was because he met Tenmu Ayam. For most people there was a reason for doing evil. For fame, for profit, for women, for pride, and so on. But Tenmu Ayam was different. Because of the black blood flowing in her body, doing evil was as instinctive as breathing for her. In addition, the woman had the ability to bewitch people comparable to hypnotism. Even if there was a little malice in one's heart, it would be magnified infinitely after talking to her. Therefore, Ryudo didn't even bother to listen to Sakata's disgusting screams as he dragged him to the balcony like a dead dog. At the same time, a large group of people had gathered outside the door on the first floor. Not long ago, there was a sudden gunshot from inside the mansion. Therefore, this group of experienced Extreme Dao members immediately wanted to break in, but they couldn't find a way. No, the door can't be pried open or smashed open. What about the back door? It's the same for the back door. It seems to be blocked by something from the inside. The ladder hasn't been brought over yet. Hurry up. Under the obstruction of the thick door Sakata made, the group of Extreme Dao members scratched their heads anxiously, but they could only anxiously look at the door. But just as they were waiting for someone to bring the ladder to the second floor, a familiar figure suddenly appeared on the balcony facing the door. Hey, look, isn't that young Master Ryudo? The first person to notice pointed to the balcony, and his voice sounded a little strange due to the shock. Suddenly, hundreds of people below looked at the balcony and were collectively stunned. In their imagination, no matter what kind of accident happened inside, young Master Ryudo was most likely done for. After all, everyone in the Rulon group knew that there was something wrong with the young master's brain, and he wasn't good at fighting. Other than having some status, he was completely useless. But who would have thought that this second-generation heir, who was regarded by everyone as the son of the group leader, would actually stand on the balcony in front of everyone's eyes? As Ryudo raised his hand, the man with a swollen face appeared before everyone's eyes. Although his face was swollen due to the beating, he could still vaguely tell that this person was Sakata Minoru, just by looking at his figure and clothes. For a moment, there was complete silence in the huge front yard. It was as if one could hear a pin drop on the ground. How is this possible? Sakata boss, he before the higher-ups could figure out what had happened. Ryudo did something even more terrifying without hesitation. He lifted Sakata Minoru's plump body with both hands and threw him down from the second-floor balcony. Because it happened too suddenly, many people below didn't react for a while. In addition, humans had instincts for danger, so the crowd in the area where Sakata landed immediately moved to the side, leaving the boss with a hard floor to stand on. Bang! A body was thrown down from the second-floor balcony, and the sound of it hitting the floor was extremely shocking. Even if the people gathered here were a group of evildoers, they couldn't help but take 2 steps back when they saw Sakata's wriggling body on the ground. The second-floor balcony wasn't particularly high, so Sakata was still alive. He wasn't dead, but he wouldn't be able to get up for a while. Is there anyone else who wants to follow Sakata? If there is, get the hell up to the second floor now. Following Ryudo's domineering and powerful roar, the thick door of the first-floor hall slowly opened from the inside. The ones who opened the door were Narukai Otani, whose hands were still bleeding, and Maya Matsuri. Just the two of them faced hundreds of pairs of eyes outside. But even when the door opened, the crowd outside didn't dare to take half a step inside. Nonsense! Who would dare to go up to the second floor at this time? Didn't they see Sakata boss being thrown down? The Sakata group was just formed today, and because they were about to fight the Rulon group, they were in a state of panic. The scene of Sakata being thrown down from the second-floor balcony by Ryudo completely destroyed their already weak fighting spirit. Seeing that the hundreds of people below didn't dare to make any moves, Ryudo took advantage of the situation and said, "Everyone, you were only bewitched by Sakata and forced to leave the dragon group, right?" Although Longdo used a question, his words didn't leave any room for people to say no. Clearly, Longdo had already given the people below him the best way out. You just have to admit that you were bewitched by Sakata. The culprit is Sakata, and you are also victims. Go back to your own homes and find your own mothers. Nothing happened today. If you don't admit it, then just like Sakata, you can wait for death. Needless to say, at this moment, Ryudo's figure was unprecedentedly tall in the eyes of the crowd. He stood high up on the balcony of the second floor and looked down at the people below with a cold gaze that seemed to be overlooking all living things. Even if he only had 2 men, and there were hundreds of members outside, it was as if he was the master here. Is this the original appearance of the young master? Sure enough, he is the son of the leader. The blood flowing in his body is the blood of the dragon. When they felt the aura of a true dragon, some of the Rulong group elders couldn't help but cry. In fact, the biggest reason they left with Sakata was because of the imprisonment of the leader, Kiryu Kazuma. The leader had been in prison for 30 years, and the chances of him being released in this lifetime were slim. The son he left behind was such a useless person. How could they not feel that the Rulong group was finished? But looking at the current Ryudo Kiryu, who would dare to say that the Rulong group was finished? Therefore, an old man who had been with the leader for many years couldn't help but shout, "Young Master Ryudo is wise. Young Master Ryudo is the best in the world." This shout obviously triggered a chain reaction, and the hundreds of people standing in the courtyard quickly shouted together, "Young Master Ryudo is wise. Young Master Ryudo is the best in the world. We pledge our lives to follow young Master Ryudo." Bah! Do you bastards know how to speak? Say it again. But at this moment Narukai Otani, who was standing at the door, shouted in a displeased tone, "Now you're still calling him young Master Ryudo? You should call him the second-generation leader." Second-generation leader? Suddenly, many people realized what was going on. Before, Ryudo had always been called young master, because he was indeed only a young master. Even if he had the blood of the leader, no one thought that he could become the second-generation leader. But now it was different. Ryudo led 2 people into the enemy's formation and executed the traitor on the spot. Such courage and ability were naturally worthy of the title of the second-generation leader. Chapter 37. After being reminded by Narukai Otani, many people immediately reacted. Originally, after Hitoshi was confirmed to be in prison for a long time, the Rulong group should have chosen the second-generation leader a long time ago. However, at that time, Ryudo was still a good-for-nothing and could not be entrusted with important tasks. The 3 consultants were all doing their own things, so the position of the leader had always been empty. And now, with Ryudo's prestige, coupled with his ability and courage to charge into the tiger's den and kill the enemy's boss, it was obvious that there was no problem for this young master of the Rulong group to inherit his father's position. It could even be said that it was a done deal. Therefore, Otani took the lead and shouted, "The second-generation leader is wise. We swear to follow the second-generation leader to our deaths. The second-generation leader is wise. We swear to follow the second-generation leader to our deaths. The second-generation leader is wise. We swear to follow the second-generation leader to our deaths." Human beings had a serious herd mentality, especially in this kind of group activity. When Otani was the first to shout out second-generation leader, this term quickly spread throughout the entire Sakata mansion, like water being released from a dam. Looking at the group of people who were originally his enemies shouting his name crazily, Ryudo, who was standing on the balcony looking down at everyone, could not help but feel a strong sense of accomplishment. This feeling is great. Humph. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He wanted to show a dignified smile, but when it reached his mouth, It turned into a terrifying arc that was a combination of cruelty and hatred. Because of the previous conflict, Ryudo's body was more or less stained with blood. This blood, coupled with his cruel and hateful smile, under the dim light of the night, made him look like a demon god descending to the mortal world. *T. The second-generation leader's smile doesn't seem very friendly. Are we not shouting loudly enough? When they saw Ryudo's expression, the group of people below shouted even louder. Even if their throats were hoarse and their vocal cords were damaged, they did not care. This kind of performance directly led to the booming business of the throat department in the Kamashido area the next day. It was just that groups of extreme men lined up to see a doctor, which more or less scared the doctor. After a few minutes of shouting, Ryudo slowly stretched out his hand and signaled everyone below to be quiet. When he stretched out his hand, it gave off a feeling of power. He was not angry, but he was even more powerful when he was angry. Brother Itama, how are you in prison? Your son has grown up now, and he's becoming more and more like you. When Ryudo reached out his hand, a few older members of the Rulon group had already had tears in their eyes. Their hearts were filled with the shadow of their former leader. Everyone, let's bring this traitor back to the Dragon Group and put him on trial according to our family rules. Ooh, trial. Trial. Following Ryudo's call, many members ran to Sakata, who was lying on the ground, and carried him out of the door like a pig. Poor Sakata, who was famous throughout his life, ended up like this in his middle age. He really deserved it. After arranging the next steps, Ryudo went down the stairs to the second floor, but he immediately saw a familiar figure. It was Yamamoto, the bodyguard who almost killed Ryudo last night. He was kneeling on the ground, looking at him with fear and trepidation. Yamamoto never dreamed that in just one day, Ryudo Kiryu would do something so earth-shattering. But no matter what, he could only hope that Ryudo would keep his promise and let him go. Second-generation leader get out, and don't appear in front of me again. I will never retaliate against you through any means. Before Yamamoto finished his trembling words, Ryudo had already walked toward the door without looking back. A promise is a promise. If he said he would let Yamamoto go, he must let Yamamoto go. Otherwise, wouldn't he be a scumbag? Second-generation leader. Is it really okay to let him go like this? Why don't I go in quietly? Looking at Yamamoto's back as he left happily, Otani, who was walking over, whispered to Ryudo. Then he made a kacha gesture. Indeed, Yamamoto can be said to have committed a heinous crime. And he knows a lot about Ryudo. Keeping him alive will always be a problem. However, Ryudo shook his head and smiled. It's okay, don't worry about Yamamoto. Someone will help us solve it. What? Someone will? Well, as expected of the second-generation leader. It seems that he already expected this. When Ryudo walked out of the door amidst the tsunami-like cheers, Otani also looked at the man who was younger than him with reverence. Not long after, the jubilant team at the Sakata mansion also walked onto the street and walked toward the Rulon Group headquarters at the other end of the street. At the same time, Yamamoto was running desperately in the dark alley. Although he looked somewhat embarrassed, Yamamoto's eyes were full of smiles. He actually really let me go. Longdo, that little brat, is really too inexperienced. After leaving the mansion, Yamamoto ran all the way to the headquarters of the Heavenly Eye Group. He couldn't wait to report what he knew to Ayam-sama, including Ryudo's changes, the cat house that appeared around him, and so on. And he also believed that he would definitely be rewarded and protected by Ayam-sama with this information. In this case, it would be easy to turn things around. Just as Yamamoto was happily thinking about the content of the report, there was a sudden tremor in the air. Then, the man only felt a pain in his heart, and his whole body fell to the ground uncontrollably. It can't be right? Until his consciousness disappeared, Yamamoto didn't understand how he died. But at the last moment, he seemed to vaguely see a flash of silver-white hair. And everything was over. Tenmu was Ayam's lackey, so there was no value in living. After killing Yamamoto and rushing back to the Kamishiro courtyard, The figure of the cat house with rabbit balls was like an old owl under the night sky. What a cunning young master. No, it should be the cunning second-generation head. On the way back, Rabbit Ball couldn't help but shake his head. He more or less felt like he was used as a tool. Ryudo deliberately let Yamamoto go, because he knew from the beginning that Rabbit Ball wouldn't let Yamamoto go back alive. After all, Yamamoto saw Rabbit Ball's face, and knew that Rabbit Ball was in cahoots with Ryudo. He couldn't let him go back and report to Iam. Such a young man actually likes miscolored glaze. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse for Kamiyoshi. Sigh. With a sigh, Rabbit Ball's figure gradually disappeared. But the night in Kamishiro had just begun. Chapter 38. Tonight, Kamadachi was extremely quiet. At the same time tonight, Kamadachi was extremely noisy. For the upcoming collision between the two organizations, countless people held their breath on the surface, but they were constantly discussing it behind their backs. If Rulon Group and Sakatagumi really fought, who would be the final winner? After this battle, what would happen to Kamadachi? Also, how many familiar faces would disappear forever tomorrow morning? People nervously and excitedly imagined the scene that might happen next, and constantly reported through various means to observe the changes in the situation. But for Fujiki Yoshio, one of the 3 consultants of Rulon Group, he didn't think about anything. He just quietly maintained his beloved sword in the room. Starting from the bottom of the sword, he put a cleaning paper on the blade, gently held the paper wrapped around the blade, and gently wiped it up with his thumb and index finger. Fujiki didn't know how many times he had done this in the past. He could still recall the ridiculous appearance of almost cutting his finger the first time. But this should be the last time. After putting his beloved sword back into the scabbard, Fujiki in a solemn kimono stood up and opened the sliding paper door next to him. In the courtyard outside the paper door, dozens of subordinates wearing suits embroidered with the mark of the dragon were kneeling together. This group of people was the real elite members of Rulon Group, and they were on a completely different level from the gangsters gathered here. After seeing consultant Fujiki Yoshio walk out of the room, this group of elites also raised their heads solemnly, and their eyes flashed with a look of facing death. Very good. Today is a good day to die. Fujiki Yoshio was obviously very satisfied with his loyal subordinates. So in front of everyone, he suddenly pulled out his beloved sword, raised it to the sky and shouted, "Brothers! That traitor Sakata wants to establish his own organization. Do you agree or not?" "No." Everyone also replied in a very imposing manner. "If you don't agree, what should we do? Kill, kill, kill." In the courtyard shrouded in the night, this group of extreme Dao elites seemed to ignite their blood as they shouted. Although there were only dozens of people, when they shouted like this, they really had the momentum of thousands of troops on the battlefield. "Good." Fujiki Yoshio took a deep breath and finally shouted, "If that's the case, then come with me. No matter how much sacrifice we have to pay, we must capture that traitor Sakata." "Lord Fujiki Yoshio, Ryudo young master has captured Sakata Minoru alive." Just as Tangmoto was about to lead his men to attack, and everyone in the courtyard was filled with excitement, a servant suddenly ran over and shouted these words that ruined the atmosphere. For a moment the courtyard was silent. Fujimoto's beloved sword froze in midair, and the hot blood of the elites froze as well. After a while, Fujimoto reluctantly asked the attendant, "You? What nonsense are you talking about?" "Yoshio Shio Yoshio 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 Minoru. Yoshio Yoshio Yoshio. Yoshio Shio Yoshio Yoshio Minoru Yoshio Yoshio Minoru. Shio 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 Yoshio." Crazy. Either I'm crazy or the world is crazy. Either way, someone is crazy. Fujimoto's face darkened as he led his subordinates towards the entrance of the headquarters. At the same time, he frantically rubbed his forehead with essential balm. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would faint on the spot. Of course, there was no essential balm in Japan. Tengbin had bought it when he was traveling to a neighboring country. It had a good effect on relieving headaches, and was a must-have for the extreme Dao. At this moment, The entrance of the Rulon Group's headquarters was already brightly lit. There were more lights and more people, and this person was a very surprising person. Outside the imposing door, a large group of strong men were kneeling uniformly, looking very conspicuous, as if they were collectively performing some kind of suspicious ritual. In front of this group of people, Ryuto Kiryu, who was shorter and skinnier than an adult, was standing under a wooden plaque with the words Ryukyu written on it. He was gesturing at his subordinates around him. Yes, 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 hang him up properly, hang him in a more conspicuous position, and put on a light or something. It's best if it's a colorful light, like the kind used in KTV. It's more imposing. Although he looked young, the group of strong men surrounding him didn't dare to slack off at all. They faithfully carried out the young master's every order. But Ryuto's order at this time, it was quite punk. When Fujimoto rushed over with his men, he just happened to see Sakata's bruised body being hung up like a pig. Until now, Sakata was still alive, and his life was not in danger. Although he was wearing a cloth that barely covered his private parts, and his hands were tied with a rope and hung at the entrance of the Rulon Group's headquarters, Sakata really wanted to find someone to shoot him. It was too shameful, too shameful. Unlike other extreme dodo, Ryuto did not execute Sakata after catching him. Instead, he did something even more outrageous. Under Ryuto's arrangement, Sakata was hung up, and the spotlights below also shone on him from all directions. The spotlights were in various colors: red, green, blue, and white. It looked particularly festive, and it was even more festive when paired with Sakata's crazily twisting fat body. "Young Master Ryuto, what are you doing?" Fujimoto asked when he came to Ryuto, who was about to get some sound equipment to play "Good Day" around Sakata. His hands were constantly rubbing essential balm. Now essential balm was equivalent to Fujimoto's heart medicine. 1 milliliter less would cause him to faint on the spot. After all, the scene in front of him was too exciting. Longdo laughed lightly. "It's nothing. I just went to Sakata's place and found out that the brothers were just deceived by him. So I kidnapped this guy and brought him back." The extreme dodo young master's words were quite casual, but of course, anyone with a brain bigger than a pine nut would not believe it. But when he saw the young master's confident and domineering appearance, Fujimoto could not help but take a deep breath. In Fujimoto's view, the current Ryuto gave off the feeling of a fish leaping over the Dragon Gate. He was completely different from the previous playboy, who caused trouble every day. Could it be the leader and I were wrong? The young master should not waste his talent, but should continue on the path of extreme dodo? Fujimoto did not say anything that night. He just took out the good wine that he had kept for more than a decade, and drank until he was dead drunk. Of course, the colorful spotlights at the entrance of the Rulon Group headquarters were also on all night, and there was a big sound system that repeatedly played a strange disco song that no one understood. Therefore, this night was called the Night of Shameful Righteousness by Kamamurachi. Don't ask how this word was coined. It was probably because of the 2 lines carved on Sakata's white butt. Chapter 39. A lot of things happened that night. For example, Ryuto finally registered his name on the Rulon Group, as he wished, and became a glorious rogue. For example, the Rulon Group and the Sakata Group once again merged into one, and 99% of the group members returned. For example, the entire Kamadachi knew about Ryuto Kiryu's mighty deeds, and even almost regarded him as a god descending to the mortal world. That's right, he was almost regarded as a god descending to the mortal world, or he was almost praised as a god descending to the mortal world. In the middle of the night, the group of men had originally planned to fight the last fight of their lives. But who would have thought that they would be muddle-headedly watching the ultimate drama of eldest young master single-handedly capturing the traitors, as if they were taking something from his pocket. Therefore, this group of Rulon Group members, who were excited, occupied almost the entire Kamadachi, like a tornado. This feeling was like the cafeteria door that had just rung when the bell rang. They walked on the street with their chests puffed out, holding a variety of drinks in their hands, and bragging about their young master's miracles to everyone they saw. In life, it was normal to drink a little and brag, not to mention that this was not completely bragging. After all, Ryudo almost single-handedly stopped the war, and also resolved a rebellion. This achievement was real, and in their view, it was not an exaggeration to boast about it. What's more, there were two members who were more eloquent, and learned a little bit of Mankai, Japanese crosstalk. They even built a shed and performed in front of the Kamadachi entrance. The crosstalk they performed was called Extreme Secret Book, Records of Ryudo Kiryo Yoshiyuki. Hey! When young Master Ryudo rushed into the enemy's formation, he shouted, "Old thief! Do you dare to fight me to the death?" Thousands of people around were shocked by the thunderous roar, and they didn't dare to move at all. They even wanted to kneel on the spot. Amazing! And then, that old scoundrel Sakata saw that the situation was bad and turned to run. Young Master Ryudo carried a large flag on his back and chased after him. When the old scoundrel saw young Master chasing after him, he was scared out of his wits. Helpless, he was stopped and could only brace himself for battle. What an old thief! The funny guy suddenly raised his voice. He's wearing bulletproof armor, holding a heavy machine gun, and carrying almost 10 bombs around his waist. He's armed to the teeth. He's an American warrior that's been trained with money. Shameless. Fuck America. But young Master Ryudo didn't panic at all. He pounced forward like lightning to dodge the machine gun's barrage, and kicked the bulletproof armor into pieces. He held the old thief down and gave him a good beating. He beat that old man until he was dizzy, blood spurted out, his eyes cracked, and yellow and red blood flowed all over the ground. Yay! After listening to the story, the surrounding gangsters and passers-by couldn't help but applaud. They all paid their respects to the brave, wise, affectionate, and righteous young master of the dragon group. Tonight, similar flattery and mythical descriptions could be said to have filled the entire Kamadachi. If not for the fact that Ryudo himself was the main character, many of the stories were so vivid that even he himself would have believed them. That's right, he almost believed that he had rushed toward the fully armed Sakata, wearing only a loincloth, dodged the machine gun's bullets with his bare hands, shattered the bulletproof armor with a kick, and easily took the head of the enemy general despite being surrounded by thousands of people. This was the power of rumors. But no matter how much nonsense it was, the lively night would eventually pass. The next morning, Ryudo woke up in a very masculine pink room. He turned on his phone and looked at the time. Monday lunar day, 7:35 a.m. After Ryudo got out of bed, he put on clean clothes that still had the smell of sunlight. After washing up, he pushed open the courtyard door. Today's sun was very bright, and there were no clouds in the sky. It was a refreshing morning. Of course, it would be better if there weren't a group of bandaged men, wearing black sunglasses, kneeling outside the courtyard to greet him. Second-generation leader. Good morning. When Ryudo appeared, the group of Rulon group members who were already kneeling outside the courtyard immediately lowered their heads and said in unison. Before Ryudo could say anything, they led the second-generation leader outside. They also sang and danced along the way. It was quite noisy. This feeling was really not refreshing at all. In Ryudo's view, this strange situation was like being surrounded by a group of greasy sumo men early in the morning. One by one, they rubbed their greasy bodies against Ryudo. Outside the Rulon group headquarters, there was already an exclusive car waiting for him. The driver was Narukai Otani. He was promoted to Ryudo's assistant last night, due to his achievement of changing sides early. Second-generation leader. I wish you good luck. Ha! The group of members sent Ryudo to the car. For some reason, they acted like the wind is blowing and the water is cold. Some were even moved to tears. However, Ryudo left early in the morning. It was actually just to go to school. Yes, that's school. Today is Monday. I, Ryudo Kiryo, am a student of Dori First High School. So going to school is normal. But because of last night's heroic deed, Ryudo's body was covered with a layer of holy light. Therefore, it led to such a grand school ceremony. Phew. Actually, I just want to go to school peacefully. Sitting in the car all the way from the Shimmarachi area to the port area, Ryuto looked at the scenery outside the window. He didn't know how to describe his complicated feelings. Ryuto's Dori First High School was located in the center of the Tokyo port area. It was the most famous high school in the city. The teachers in this school were strong. There were even a lot of people who were born in rich and famous families. In the future, they would bear the fate of the country. Of course, Ryuto Kiryu was not included. After all, this young Master Kyoto couldn't even recognize the 26 English letters. He was in existence between illiteracy and idiocy. The reason why Ryuto was able to enter this high school was mainly because of his father's favor. It was said that the principal of Dori First High School had a dispute with Kyoto at a nightclub. His head was almost smashed on the spot. In the end, it was Kazuma who passed by that saved him. As the car slowly moved forward, there were more men and women in uniforms on the surrounding streets. When he saw the familiar uniforms and streets, Ryuto couldn't help but show a happy, arrogant smile. In Red Photo Album 2, No Survivors, Dori First High School was the main game location. At least 60% of the events happened in the school. The most important thing was that 2 of the 3 heroines went to school here. The third heroine also transferred here. It could be said that it was the holy land of love games. Dori First High School. I'm coming. At the moment when he got off the car, Ryuto stood in front of the familiar school gate and looked up at the familiar school emblem at the front gate. However, what he didn't know was that his sudden stop had caused a human dragon to appear on the street behind him. Chapter 40. Today's Dori No. 1 High School was known as the gathering place of the golden generation by insiders. Don't know if it was suddenly discussed, but the entire elite of Tokyo sent their children to this school during this period of time. For a time, the Dori No. 1 High School was surging. According to incomplete statistics, there were at least hundreds of parents who had a net worth of hundreds of millions, or who held various kinds of power. However, among them, the most eye-catching were the 3 young ladies known as the Misaka 3 families. The royal family who ruled Shinto, the Kanzaki, the multinational technology company, the Tsukumori, and the ancient warrior clan with a long history, the Tingtong. Very coincidentally, these 3 young ladies not only had an extremely noble background, but also extremely beautiful appearance. They also studied in the first-year classa, the second-year classa, and the third-year class at these 3 elite classes. Therefore, the 3 of them were collectively known as the Misaka 3 families, representing their noble status. Of course, in addition to the Misaka 3 families, Ryuto Kiryu was naturally a well-known figure in the Dori No. 1 High School. Unfortunately, his reputation was 100% notorious, especially after last night's Kamikaze Sakuya night. Last night's Kamidachi storm had naturally swept through the entire Dongjing. And this kind of thing, as the number of people who read it increased, it led to the content becoming more and more excessive. Even early in the morning, there was already a bullshit rumor that Ryuto personally killed hundreds of thousands of people last night, killing until Kamisato turned into a river of blood. Don't know if the people of Kamisato were enough for him to kill. In this case, as the time passed, the 8:30 school deadline was getting closer and closer. However, inexplicably, there were 2 long lines in front of the Dori No. 1 High School. The gate of this high school was actually very wide, and dozens of students walking side by side was not a problem. But why were the students who came to class lined up on both sides and didn't walk through the large open space in the middle? At this time, a student who had not yet woken up also found this problem. He was a male high school student who looked to be only 16 or 17 years old. He was tall and had a ferocious look on his face. To be specific, he was the high school version of Fat Tiger. Moreover, Fat Tiger's father was an executive of a certain company. His family was quite rich, and he had been used to being tyrannical since he was young. It was this guy who looked like he was not to be trifled with. When he saw the long line on both sides of the school gate, he walked towards the center unwillingly. What the hell? Are these guys crazy? Wasn't the road in the middle very spacious? Why didn't they dare to leave? He rubbed his sleepy eyes and took a few steps toward the middle of the door. Then he saw the figure standing in the middle of the door. The first thing he saw was a head of dazzling yellow hair. His yellow hair stood on end. From the back, he looked like a sea urchin or a starfish. For some reason, it made people feel that this person's card-playing skills were not bad. "Hey, who are you?" Tong. Ryudo Kiryu. When Fat Tiger came to Long Do and patted him on the shoulder, Long Do also turned his head to look at him. Fat Tiger's ferocious face immediately collapsed. "It's over. How could it be him? Why didn't I notice it?" In an instant, the surrounding students looked at Fat Tiger with pity in their eyes. It felt like they were using their eyes to send a message like, "Young man, you have a long way to go. See you in the next life." Who is this guy? My friend? After being patted on the shoulder by Fat Tiger, Ryudo also woke up from his memories of this school. He turned his head and looked at the high school student who was covered in cold sweat. In fact, when Ryudo came to this Dory First High School, he could not help but be immersed in the scenes in the game to the point that he forgot the passage of time. This caused him to stand in the middle of the door like a stone, as if he was in some kind of strange thought. Naturally, the people who saw this scene were also shocked by the strange actions of the second generation of the Rulong group. Is he planning to do something to Dory First High School? This guy is crazy, it's better to stay away. A gentleman does not stand by a collapsing wall. Under the guidance of this way of thinking, the students consciously bypassed Ryudo from both sides and entered the school gate. The scene looked like Moses parting the sea. However, when Ryudo and Fat Tiger's eyes met, the latter's body immediately froze. He quickly curled up his tall body, as if he was trying to turn himself from Fat Tiger into a small man. Bean-sized beads of sweat continued to slide down from his head. His legs were slightly bent, as if he was ready to kneel at any time. The muscles on his face also quickly squirmed, as if he was trying to twist into a flattering expression. However, it was the opposite and looked very funny. When Ryudo saw the change in this guy's state, he was somewhat confused. What's going on? Did something terrifying appear? He turned his head and looked behind him. He found that the surrounding area was empty. The nearest students were 5 meters away. Nothing terrifying had appeared. So why was this guy so scared? Ryudo scratched his head. He didn't seem to realize that the person Fat Tiger was afraid of was himself. So, Ryudo asked in a friendly manner, "Student, are you okay?" Although his tone was very friendly, in Fat Tiger's eyes, there was a strong murderous intent in this kindness. What's going on? Why is Master Ryudo asking me this question? Wait, is he hinting at something with Jidao slang? Suddenly Fat Tiger understood. He understood the hidden meaning in this seemingly ordinary conversation. "Student, do you know what you are? Are you okay?" Patting my shoulder. "Do you want to die? I'm very sorry. Forgive me for being rude." In an instant, Fat Tiger hurriedly knelt on the ground with lightning speed and bowed in an extremely standard posture. Just as Fat Tiger knelt, there was a burst of discussion in the crowd that was trying to suppress. "This person is so scary. He forced people to kneel in front of the school gate as soon as he arrived. Don't look at him. That guy is probably crazy. He killed so many people last night, and he dares to swagger to school today. He's so pitiful. If I was in the same class as him, I would probably ask to drop out today." Although the surrounding discussion was scattered, it was like a storm that constantly swept through the area, pushing the fierce reputation of Battle Dragon to another peak. What's going on? Could it be that they were afraid of me? Long Do, on the other hand, was stunned for a moment before he realized why there was such a ridiculous situation around him. "Don't, students. I came to school to study and fall in love. It's for the sweet campus life. You guys are treating me like a demon king. How am I supposed to live my sweet life on campus like this?" Chapter 41. No, I'm not that kind of bad guy. I have to let them know that I'm a good person. In order to change his image, Ryudo decided to do some kind actions to let everyone know that he was not that kind of bad guy. So with a gentle smile on his face, he smiled at Fat Tiger and said, "Student, You should get up first. This is the school gate. It's not appropriate to kneel here. Ryudo thought his smile was very kind, but in fact, in the eyes of Fat Tiger and the surrounding students, it was a completely different scene. In the eyes of everyone, Ryudo Kiryo's mouth raised a strange arc, and his eyes released a strong murderous intent, as if he was looking at a corpse. It's over. It's over. It's over. After hearing these words, Fat Tiger's body trembled even more, and even his crotch was almost wet, because Ryudo's words just now had a completely different meaning in his ears. Student, you should get up first. Bastard, do you think kneeling is enough? This is the school gate. It's not appropriate to kneel here. When you leave the school, I will throw you to the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish. Whoa. I'm sorry. I'll go back and write my will right away. So in the next moment, Fat Tiger finally couldn't bear such a huge pressure, and quickly ran toward the sun in the distance. As soon as Fat Tiger ran, the surrounding students couldn't help but tremble. No way. This Ryudo Kiryo is too much, right? A death threat early in the morning? He wants me to go back and write my will. Don't say his name, something bad will happen. Yes, then we'll use Mysterious Man instead. This is what was done in Harry Peter and the Stone Ghost Mask. As the students walked into the school gate trembling, from this moment on, Ryudo had his own new nickname, Mysterious Man. It had to be said that although this nickname was quite awe-inspiring, Long Do was truly wronged. He couldn't explain it now, and no one would believe him. Anything he said would be misinterpreted. This was the reality. What the hell? Isn't my identity a little too difficult? With a sigh, Ryudo walked into the first high school. His previous excitement could be said to have been completely extinguished. Now, it was obvious that the students were very afraid of him. They felt that he was a psychopath who killed without batting an eyelid. This was simply outrageous. Ryudo himself might not be a good student, but at least he was a normal person. At most, he would just hang people up and turn on the fluorescent lights. But after all, public opinion can distort gold, causing accumulated information to corrode the bones. Rumors are fearful and can reverse right and wrong. It really wasn't difficult to kill people from a societal point of view by relying on rigid prejudices without real evidence. If Ryudo did not find a way to reverse the situation, he would probably have to spend the next 2 years as a mystery man. If that was the case, it would be better to just quit school and leave, so that he wouldn't have to endure such humiliation. As he walked, Ryudo could not help but feel that such a world was rather boring. But after walking for a while, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. It was a middle-aged man in a suit. He had a square face and he looked very strict. Isn't this Mr. Mei Yuan? So this is what he looks like. In the game, Mei Yuan was the class teacher of the main character's grade 2 class A, and he was also a core character who often appeared. Although he was strict and old-fashioned, he valued the students very much. He was a rare good teacher. Later on, there was even a famous scene where he confronted the Heavenly Eye group in order to save the main character's group. So when he passed by, Ryudo casually bowed to Mei Yuan and said, "Good morning, Mr. Mei Yuan." "Aha, good morning." Originally, Mr. Mei Yuan also turned his head and replied to Ryudo with familiarity. But before he finished his words, the expression on his face was strongly distorted. To be honest, it was the first time that Ryudo saw such an exaggerated expression on Mei Yuan's old-fashioned square face. He actually twisted his square face into An's shape, as if he was trying his best to put on a show. How is this possible? Could it be that I stayed up too late last night to mark the test papers? So I'm hallucinating? For the first time in his life, Mr. Mei Yuan had the thought that there was something wrong with his eyes or his brain. After all, even if he was willing to admit that there was something wrong with him, he was not willing to admit that Ryudo Kiryo would greet him so early in the morning. Didn't this guy always walk in a way that didn't recognize anyone? Didn't he like to stare at people with his nostrils and treat teachers as nothing? Why would he greet me? And with such a kind expression? Not good. There must be something wrong with my condition. What is the problem? Is there a tumor in my brain? Or is there a hallucination or auditory hallucination? Can I still be saved? Medical technology is so advanced now. If it's early, there should still be time. Thinking of this, Mei Yuan couldn't help but sweat profusely. Sweat soaked his face, shirt, and pants. At the same time, it also strengthened Mei Yuan's determination to go to the hospital after school to do a full body check. Just as Mei Yuan suspected that he had some kind of illness, Ryudo had already arrived at the second-floor corridor of the teaching building and was walking towards his grade 2 class B. Generally speaking, the school corridor at this time was very crowded. But when Ryudo appeared, the students in the corridor consciously moved closer to the sides. Whether male or female, they all turned around to face the wall or outside the wall. They didn't dare to look at Ryudo, who was walking in the middle of the corridor. Ha ha ha. The corridor is so wide and smooth. After understanding that this situation could not be changed for the time being, Long Do could only go with the flow and walk forward. It didn't take long before Ryudo arrived at the door of grade 2 class B. From the door, he could clearly hear the lively sound coming from inside. Dozens of boys and girls were happily enjoying the last relaxing time before class. But the moment Ryudo's figure appeared, the originally lively sound inside suddenly disappeared. The atmosphere was as cold as a funeral parlor preparing for a funeral. Do you know how fast a woman's face changes? Faster than flipping a book. Do you know how fast the students of grade 2 class B collectively change their faces? Faster than flipping a book. 1 second. In just 1 second, grade 2 class B was completely silent. It felt as if someone had cast a silence debuff on all the students in the classroom. With my identity as a teacher, I can guarantee that the students won't even dare to fart in class. After looking at the group of students who were as scared as rabbits, Ryudo slowly walked towards his seat in the second last row by the window. He walked abnormally slowly. It wasn't that Ryudo usually walked this slowly, but he was afraid that if he walked a few steps faster, he would scare people into the hospital. When Ryudo sat down and looked out the window, the students in the class finally relaxed, but they still didn't dare to breathe loudly. My sweet school life. Forget it. I'll just have a chat with the young mistress. In order to not scare the students, Ryudo could only keep his head facing the window. Then he openly took out his phone and sent a message to Kenzaki-colored glaze from grade 2 class A. Chapter 42. In the entire Dori No. 1 high school, the only person who could speak normally to Ryudo was probably the scion from year 2 class A next door, Kenzaki-colored glaze. Just as Ryudo was bored and sent a message to the scion, year 2 class A next door was currently in a state of laziness before class started. A group of young, healthy, and energetic high school students were either studying their textbooks or whispering to their friends. The atmosphere was no different from an ordinary high school class. Of course, this group of people who didn't have much of a difference definitely didn't include the young lady who sat in the second last row by the window. Although they were all sitting in the same classroom, anyone who entered the classroom, as long as they weren't blind, would involuntarily look in her direction. Of course, one of the reasons for this was the girl's beauty, but that wasn't the only reason. Kenzaki-colored glaze was indeed very beautiful. Her small, white face seemed to have been carved out of ice. Her features were beautiful, and her figure was slender and slender. She was flawless from head to toe. But apart from her natural beauty, what left an even deeper impression on others was her imposing figure, as well as the cold aura that seemed to emanate from her heart. Her chin was slightly raised, her back was perfectly straight, and her red lips were slightly narrowed. She seemed like a human-shaped jade sculpture. This special aura that far exceeded her age, and coupled with Kenzaki-colored glaze's family background, which was quite eye-catching even in this school, it was enough to make her seem like a crane in a flock of chickens. With such a dignified young lady sitting here, the consequence was that not many students in grade 2 class A dared to get close to her, let alone have the guts to sneak a peek at her. It felt as if there was an invisible barrier between her and the world, elegantly separating this girl from the mortal world, preventing her from being tainted by even a speck of dust. But was such a barrier really what the scion wanted? Not at all. Colored glaze also wanted to be like other students, chatting with friends when she had nothing to do, eating lunch together, going shopping together, and so on. After all, her identity as a colored glaze made it impossible for her to interact with others as she wished. Even if it was just a meeting between friends, there were still many restrictions. Zhai Wang was equivalent to a statue of a god, a living statue of a god. People would feel respect for the statues, but they would also feel a sense of awe towards them, causing them to not dare to approach them. Colored glaze was already used to this kind of life, or rather, she had already given up on it. Beep, 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 beep. Just as the teacher was about to arrive, colored glaze suddenly felt an almost inaudible vibration. The vibration came from the bag hanging beside the desk. Of course, colored glaze's bag didn't have anything else that would vibrate. It was just a normal reaction after receiving a message. Information. Who is it? Generally speaking, there weren't many people who would send messages to colored glaze, no more than 5. Thus, she curiously picked up her phone and opened the text message page. This message was from Ryudo Kiryu. Although there weren't many people who knew colored glaze's phone number, she just happened to exchange numbers with Ryudo yesterday. However, colored glaze was still somewhat baffled as to why Ryudo would send her a message at this time. But she still used her slender and dexterous fingers to quickly open the letter and read the content inside. Miss, now everyone in the school is treating me like a lunatic who ran out of a mental hospital. What should I do? Please reply quickly. I'm burning with anxiety. By Ryudo Kiryu. Puffed. When she saw the message, colored glaze couldn't help but laugh. This laugh was like 100 flowers blooming, suddenly making this proud scion a lot cuter. So pitiful, is it because of what happened at Kamishimachi yesterday? With colored glaze's intelligence, she naturally didn't even have to think about what happened to Ryudo. Last night's spectacular Kamishimachi Ryudo night could be said to be quite famous, and it was even discussed in various forums on the internet. People were excitedly predicting the outcome of the civil war between Rulon Group and Sakata Group, and some people even opened bets on whether the two groups would disappear that night. After all, in the eyes of ordinary people, Extreme Tao was like a rat in the sewer. Everyone wanted them to fight each other to the death, and it would be best if they all died. However, the appearance of Ryudo Kiryu changed everything. The young master of Rulon Group cleaned up the scene like a god, quickly captured Sakata, and reunited the divided Rulon Group, which could be described as shocking. In this case, it wasn't difficult for colored glaze to imagine what people would think of Ryudo when he came to school the next day. Of course, colored glaze knew that Ryudo wasn't the kind of monster that fell from the sky, like in the rumors. Although this guy's brain was a bit strange, he was still a good person. This wasn't a good person card. So colored glaze also smiled and replied with 4 simple words, can't help. Can't help? So cold. After looking at the reply that was immediately sent back, Ryudo's mouth twitched, and he showed an indescribable expression. However, the change in his expression startled the teacher, who just walked into the classroom. What's going on? Why did I see Ryudo Kiryu curling his lips at me as soon as I came in? Is there something wrong with my outfit today that he doesn't like? Thinking of this, the math teacher quickly and solemnly fixed his clothes and hair, then stood on the podium with trepidation. However, Ryudo didn't notice the change in the teacher's expression at all. Instead, he continued to attack colored glaze with text messages. Although he was isolated in school, Ryudo didn't want to give up. Since he came to this world of love games, he naturally wanted to live a romantic and youthful high school life. Therefore, first of all, Ryudo needed to think of some ways to make himself popular. Miss, if I join the baseball team now and help the school team reach Koshien, will the students change their view of me? By Ryudo Kiryu. Ha ha ha. If Lioli hadn't covered her mouth in time when she saw the message, her laughter would have probably spread throughout the entire grade 2 class A. What is this guy thinking? A guy who has never played baseball wants to lead the team to Koshien. Why don't you fly, idiot? So colored glaze could only continue to reply. Not likely after all. When you join the baseball team, the other players will choose to retire. So cruel? Seeing that his plan didn't work, Ryuto continued to scratch his head and think. Of course, while he was thinking, he also sent his idea to Colored Glaze. And then it was rejected by Colored Glaze. This repeated until noon. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.